Entering Apocalypse in Easy Mode. Chapter 61 Personal Request. What Gremory is currently offering does sound like a good deal. Because she offers it for free. In fact, it's too good for the level of a demon. I can't believe you'd give something away for free, Clyde said. The corners of Gremory's lips turned upwards slightly, as if indicating that she almost let out a laugh. But she managed to suppress it. Ah, all right. I give up. I won't try to trick you anymore, Gremory replied. I knew it would be like this. Clyde felt his chest pounding. He was just about to say yes to that demon. What Gremory did was indeed very dangerous for humans who weren't careful. She didn't say any conditions and only said the reward she would give. Some people will obviously be easily fooled by that trick. Clyde really didn't want to make a demon feel offended. However, Gremory openly almost tricked him and it made his anger raise. If you don't have anything else to say, then you better leave, Clyde said in a cold voice. It was obvious Gremory would ask for something in return from the 3 answers that she said were free. The longer he is with her, the greater the possibility for Clyde to fall into her cunning tricks. No. Don't get mad like that. I didn't do it on purpose. It just became my habit after so long, Gremory said. Clyde looked at her sharply. Let's finish quickly. No more tricks. Name your price. Gremory looked at Clyde with the same eyes. Namely the amused eyes and a thin smile on her face. Gremory's face now would always look sly in Clyde's eyes. The impression she gave him after the attempt to trick him just now would not go away. Maybe forever. And that's good because that way, Clyde will always be careful when with her. Maybe all demons will be like that. So Clyde had to prepare himself because he felt that this was not his last encounter with the demons. He also had to be prepared the next time he met other Celestials. All right, Gremory nodded her head curtly. Tomorrow, when Chapter 2 begins, I'd like you to do some things for me. What's that? I'll send it to you right now. Gremory stretched out her hand towards Clyde as if giving something to him. Not long after that, in Clyde's eyes, a new window appeared that he had never seen before. Even more confusing, the color of the window was different from normal. The window is now pink and with black writing. It's as if this new window is something completely outside the system that manages this apocalypse and just forces its way in. You have received a personal request from Demon Duchess Gremory. Clyde's brow furrowed deeply. Personal quests. Demon Duchess Gremory's personal request. 1. The green Wendigo's blood, 0/1. 2. The blue Wendigo's blood, 0/1. 3. The red Wendigo's blood, 0/1. Clyde scanned the window with 3 personal requests in front of him. All of that seems suspicious. He never knew there were Wendigos with different colors. What Clyde knew from the book he had read was that the Wendigo only had a grey body. What is this? Clyde asked. That's what you have to do to get the answers to the 3 questions that I will give you, Gremory answered. You should get answers before you know what to do. But you're smart enough not to be fooled. Clyde knew what Gremory meant by his words. If he asks and gets an answer, then like it or not he must complete all of her personal requests. If he failed, then Clyde would receive a consequence he couldn't imagine. Shit, I just avoided death, Clyde thought. See. What if I can't clear everything? Clyde asked. Then you will only get the answer from how many you clear, Gremory gave a very simple answer. May I know what the consequences will be if I already receive an answer, and fail to complete your personal request? Clyde asked again out of curiosity. Gremory chuckled. Well, actually it's not as bad as you think. You will only have a bond in the form of debt to me, which you have to pay when I ask for it. Clyde snorted. Seems like you want to tie me up as a slave. Gremory only showed a faint smile that was full of meaning. She did not deny or justify Clyde's words. How difficult is it? Clyde asked. They're pretty strong. But at your current level, they shouldn't be a problem. Once again, Clyde couldn't believe Gremory's words. I have to do this task with the assumption that this colorful Wendigo is strong enough. That way, he won't die silly. You still seem quite worried. Don't worry. Even if you accept those personal requests, you haven't gotten anything from me, so there won't be any consequences for you. It's just that if you fail, you won't get anything either. Clyde stared at her. Just that. Gremory nodded its head. Yet. Clyde thought for a few moments. Before he finally answered. All right. I'll accept your personal request. Then you just need to finish it. Once you get the blood, call me with this. Gremory opened her palm up. A necklace with a certain symbol appeared floating above her palm. Gremory moved her hand and the necklace flew towards Clyde. Clyde took the necklace and looked at it. There was some kind of symbol he had never seen there. The symbol is a complex combination of circular shapes and curved lines. Call my name and I will come. Wear the necklace, Gremory said. No thanks, the necklace disappears into Clyde's inventory. Gremory let out a chuckle. Is that it? Clyde asked. Yeah, Gremory replied. That was it. A portal appears next to Clyde. The portal was different from the portal he used to enter earlier. Instead, the portal looked the same as the one Gremory had used to come from earlier. Clyde walked through the portal. Before he disappeared inside, Gremory's voice sounded. See you soon, Clyde. Chapter 62. Back to motel. Clyde stepped out of the portal. His feet hit the asphalt in the same place where he had just entered before. He had no idea how long time actually passed in this world. With Gremory's ability to temporarily stop time, the time shouldn't have passed too long. When he just came out of the portal, then a notification about the successful quest appeared. Quest completed. Reward, rank C dungeon key. Rewards sent to inventory. Gremory is maybe one of the parties who manipulated this quest. But Clyde didn't mind too much because he also got something from her. Personal requests, hey. Clyde walked down the deserted and ruined streets. His mind wandered thinking about the various possibilities that might happen tomorrow. He had to find 3 types of Wendigo that had different distinctive colors. The request sounded quite difficult considering all the things that had happened. But if he doesn't complete the personal requests, Clyde wouldn't be able to ask what he wanted to know about this apocalypse. Just now Clyde was trying to hold himself back so as not to accidentally ask his question. Even though he felt that curiosity rose in his heart. Or that question will only lead him to a disaster. Namely the debt he owed to that demon. Clyde didn't even ask how the apocalypse setting was manipulated in the future. Although it is a very important thing. Once again the same reason was that he didn't want to be trapped by debt to Gremory. Clyde glanced around. But there was nobody for him to see. He can't help but thinks that maybe everyone is already dead. And only the people he had seen were still alive. Like his group members in that other group. Clyde didn't know what to feel. To be honest, he didn't care much for them. Because he really couldn't do anything. He was never someone who wanted to be a hero. So, saving people he didn't know was something he never thought about. However, that feeling seems to have changed in the last 2 days. Clyde's feelings become contradictory to his self before the apocalypse. He had no intention of saving others who were of no use to him. But when he saw his group members, Clyde acted almost without thinking to fight alongside them. He kept telling himself that he did it because he needed them to help him survive. But, is that really the truth? Clyde no longer knows what happened to him. He who has always been alone suddenly has to be faced with a situation when he has to cooperate with other people. Clyde shook his head. There's no use thinking about that, Alpha. Oh. He didn't even know why he suddenly thought about that now. He should have thought of a plan for tomorrow though. So Clyde immediately removed that thought from his head. Thinking about it will only give unnecessary burdens. For now. As long as we both focus on survival, we will continue to work together. That's right. Clyde didn't need to think about whether there was a greater bond between himself and the rest of his group than the mutual desire to survive. After all, there's still a chance that they'll betray him, right? Night's getting late. Clyde walked towards the motel where he and the rest of the group were staying. Once he got there, Clyde found that the motel was still empty. No other group members have returned yet. Are they still running quests? Clyde walked back outside and stood at the lobby door. His eyes moved in all directions but he could only see chaos. But it didn't take him long to wait because he saw the rest of the group already walking towards the motel from the dark end of the street. They walked with tired movements. Sonia and Isksa are the ones who seem to be suffering the most from exhaustion. But they were both still able to walk on their own despite their limp steps and slumped shoulders. You're back, Clyde, Rodney said. Clyde answered with a nod. Then his eyes fixed on Isksa and Sonia who looked exhausted. Let's get in, Clyde said. They went into the motel and rested. The regressors told Clyde that they would immediately rest. Clyde saw no reason to hinder them. So the 4 regressors went to their respective rooms. Sonia and Isksa had also gone into their room. Clyde watched them both from the doorway. What happened? Clyde asked. We seem to be running out of magic power, Sonia answered in a tired voice. That could be dangerous, Clyde said. Yet. Sonia made an answer that sounded a bit like a sigh. While Isksa, who was next to him, had closed his eyes with a slightly open mouth. Maybe she was too tired to even have a hard time maintaining consciousness for even a moment. Clyde felt that this was not the right time to talk to them. I'll go now. Sorry to interrupt you, Clyde said and left without waiting for a response from Sonia. He closed the door slowly and walked towards his room. There must be bad consequences when they run out of their magic power. Unfortunately, Clyde didn't know what it was. He took off the dark night coat and placed the elder glass sword next to where he lay. Clyde stared up at the ceiling of his room. There were still many things he didn't know. The Celestials, World Masters, and what would happen after the 6th day after they managed to survive. All of that is still a mystery that makes Clyde feel a disturbing feeling of uneasiness and anxiety. Clyde took a deep breath and exhaled it. Hopefully, that way he can calm down. Because tomorrow, he would still have to face something troublesome. He has to kill 3 Wendigos of 3 different colors. That personal request sounds weird in this situation. But Clyde had a hunch that a Wendigo with a different color would be stronger than a normal Wendigo. Moreover, when someone messes up the setting of this apocalypse. Chapter 63 Breakfast. Once again, the sound of an alarm coming from an unknown place started everything that would happen today. Attention! The second chapter will start now. The second chapter, Unbearable Hunger, begins now. Chapter 2, Unbearable Hunger. Difficulty D. Objective: survive from the attacks of unbearable hunger. Clyde opened his eyes after hearing that voice. He sat up on his bed and stared ahead for a few moments. I've felt it already, Clyde muttered to himself. Clyde felt his stomach growl with hunger. Even when he had just opened his eyes and the sun was not yet high. Yet Clyde felt that he had not eaten for a whole day. Which he knew was not true. So Clyde got up and left his room. As soon as he came out of the room, Clyde smelled the aroma of cooking which excited his appetite. Clyde walked towards the kitchen. Someone was already cooking the breakfast there. Sure enough, when he was in the kitchen, Clyde saw Isksa wearing an apron and staring at the food on the table. This motel is indeed small. So there's no restaurant here. However, there is a kitchen that the motel staff might use to rest. Isksa, who was preparing the food, barely noticed Clyde's arrival. But not long after Clyde came, she looked up and smiled. You're awake, Isksa said. Clyde seemed amazed by all the dishes on the table. The food was made from the ingredients they had gathered yesterday. Isksa cooks a wide variety of dishes from chicken, beef, and pasta, enough to fill the table. Clyde felt this was a pretty extravagant dish considering what they were going to face after this. However, he won't be able to complain too much because his stomach feels like it agrees with what Isksa has prepared. Clyde, who felt hunger eating his stomach, gulped. His eyes stared slightly widened at the food. You're hungry, right? Isksa asked. Yes. I think the effects of this chapter are already being felt, Clyde replied. How about you? Isksa nodded his head. Yes. I've also felt it since I woke up. But I'm holding it until this food is finished. Why do you bother cooking? Clyde couldn't stop thinking. In the midst of a situation like this, Isksa still finds the need to cook. However, that could be a good sign that she has been able to make peace with this chaotic world situation. I just want to do something useful, Isksa replied. Clyde stared at her. You've done enough already. I know. Isksa smiled. Don't worry. I'm feeling better and I'm not going to be that whiny girl anymore. Upon hearing Isksa's words, Clyde smiled faintly. Then nodded in full approval. Good, Clyde said curtly. Then Clyde walked over to the chair and started grabbing some food for himself. You're not going to wait for the others to wake up first? Isksa asked while looking at Clyde with shocked eyes. No, said Clyde coldly. You should eat too. They'll wake up soon. Isksa also actually felt very hungry. So she also immediately took food of her own. Just as Clyde had expected, the regressors came before long. Their faces still looked tired because they just woke up. But even so, they immediately sat down and devoured the food that was on the table. Not a word was spoken between them during the meal. They didn't even ask who had cooked all this and Isksa didn't bother to explain either. It was because they were only focused on getting rid of the hunger in their screaming stomachs. A few minutes later they were finished eating. The 7 people leaned back in the chairs with relieved looks on their faces. Am I going to get fat after this? Sonia let out a chuckle. No. Everything will be back to normal tomorrow, Mona replied. Good, Sonia said. It's pretty impressive you can still think about getting fat at a time like this, Eric said. Sonia shrugged. Just curious. Clyde was the first to rise from his chair. You want to go? Asksa looked at Clyde in shock. Yes, replied Clyde. Shouldn't we just hide here because of the unexpected setting of this apocalypse? Rodney asked with a frown. Yeah, you guys have to stay here. But I have to do something by myself, Clyde said. Clyde didn't want to waste time. So he was already walking towards the door without saying much anymore. Are you sure you don't need help? Asksa asked while looking at his back. The question made Clyde stop in the doorway. Indeed, having Asksa help him with her healing ability will definitely help a lot. However, does he want to involve Asksa in completing this dangerous task? Clyde turned to Asksa. You don't have to do that. Asksa bit her lip. What exactly do you want to do? Why did you keep it a secret from us? Rodney asked. Clyde glanced at Rodney. This is something dangerous. I'd better do it myself. You think we can't fight alongside you? Rodney asked again. No. Clyde answered quickly. Almost instantly. That answer made Rodney grind his teeth. I'm just saying the truth. Your chances of survival will be greater if you stay in hiding rather than coming with me, Clyde added. After that Clyde walked away before they could say anything to stop him. They were all silent at the dining table with their thoughts. Asksa bit her lip nervously because she was worried for Clyde. But, she also knew that what Clyde said was true. She won't be able to help him even if she wants to. Don't you guys feel suspicious? Suddenly in the middle of the silence, Rodney said something that was enough to catch their attention, so they looked at him. What do you mean? Sonia asked the question. Rodney paused to think for a few moments. He had to convey his words as best he could so as not to sound like he was cornering Clyde. But it can also make them question his actions. Chapter 64 Looking for Wendigo. Rodney glanced at all of them and waited for their reactions. A moment later, Sonia stood up from her chair. I want to go to my room right now. Asksa, you want to come? Sonia seemed to want to avoid the conversation. She stared at Asksa with eyes indicating that. Asksa returned Sonia's gaze. A moment later she stood up as well. But what about these dishes? Asksa asked. Sonia exhaled. Why are you still thinking about that? Isn't there a lot of clean furniture left here? Asksa immediately thought that Sonia's words were true. She can't leave the habit where she always cleans the dining table after finishing eating. But now the apocalypse is going on. So that kind of behavior doesn't matter. Asksa followed Sonia out of the kitchen, leaving the regressors without saying anything. The silence continued for the regressors. Reed glanced at Rodney with a questioning look. What are you thinking? Reed asked. Just like what I said earlier. Clyde might be hiding something from us, Rodney replied. I don't see a problem with it, Eric said. I know maybe he doesn't want to share how he got his powers. But, it doesn't mean that he means evil. Are you sure? Rodney asked while looking at Eric. What do you mean? Eric asked back with a frown. Don't you think that Clyde might just be using us for his purposes, said Rodney. Mona slightly widened her eyes after realizing what Rodney meant. You mean? Clyde was just using the information we have about what's going to happen next. Mona said. That's very possible, right? Then when we're not very useful, he'll maybe be going to ditch us. Rodney replied. They all looked thoughtful. After all, it's not like they become friends even though they had fought together. It didn't take long for Eric to ask. But didn't we do the same to him? His words made his fellow regressors turn towards Eric almost simultaneously. In a world that has been thrown into chaos like this, aren't we simply using each other to survive? They fell silent again. The 4 of them were just taking advantage of each other too. Isn't that basically how living creatures at work? By always taking advantage of others for their ends? I guess you're right, Reed said with a shrug. If that's what Clyde wants, we can't do anything, can we? I don't like that, Mona snapped. What if he betrays us later? I'm not saying we have to trust him completely, Reed said. If any sign that he's going to betray us shows up, we can leave. We're not that stupid, are we? Or we can betray him before he does that, Rodney said in a hushed voice. He knew that Isksa and Sonia had gone to their rooms by the sound of their footsteps moving away. The two of them must have been out of range to overhear this conversation. Because of that, Rodney dared to say such a thing. Eric, Reed, and Mona looked at him with different expressions. Eric looked at him disapprovingly. Reed didn't really like the idea either, but that doesn't mean it was out of question for him. Meanwhile, Mona seemed interested in listening to his plan. Rodney, who saw their gazes, immediately explained his meaning in the same whispering voice. You guys know how day 5 is going to go, Rodney said. We can use Clyde for that. On the other hand, Clyde is walking down a ruined street. Clyde has packed a few foods in the refrigerators of the motel rooms into his inventory. So that later when hunger comes, Clyde doesn't need to be bothered. He was quite surprised to find the sky suddenly turned cloudy and dark. Sunlight seems difficult to reach the earth, obstructed by those hanging grey clouds. The sound of thunder also echoed, either far away or even right above Clyde. Yet, the atmosphere here seems quiet. No sign of monsters appearing. At this rate, Clyde could have a hard time finding the Wendigos that Gremory wanted. It is still very early in the morning. But, he didn't know what kind of trouble there would be. So Clyde always moves in the mindset that he only has so little time. Even now no ordinary Wendigos have appeared. Where should I look for them? The last time Clyde knew, the Wendigo had no problem moving around during the day. But, what he knows could be wrong because this apocalypse can be unexpected. So, Clyde decided to get into one of the subways. If indeed the Wendigo is a creature that dwells in the dark, in this apocalypse, there is a good chance that they will be down there. Clyde descended the stairs with his hand gripping the hilt of the elder glass sword. His eyes immediately focused on scanning the subway area. But he only found scattered corpses and an unbearable stench. Then, not far ahead, Clyde also saw an object that looked like a vending machine. But instead of selling snacks or drinks, the vending machine sells skills. It is such a coincidence. I'd better buy a skill now. Clyde walked over to the bodies. When he was in front of the skill purchasing machine, Clyde saw the skill list on the screen in front of him. There are a lot of good skills here. Clyde pressed his hand on the coin insert and used his mind to buy the skills he wanted. Tringug. Skill EXP Plus has been purchased. 5,000 coins used. Clyde smiled. Even though this skill is quite expensive, Clyde is sure that no one will think that his decision is wrong. Clyde took the silver tube that came out and immediately learned the skill. With this skill, Clyde can double the EXP he gets. There is no clear description. However, Clyde guesses that the amount of experience he gets will increase as the level of the skill increases. Grrhh. A low growl sounded from the passage where the train was passing. Clyde immediately bought another skill that he was after. Skill Pure Lightning has been purchased. 5,500 coins used. Chapter 65 Ambushed. Clyde hurriedly picked up the silver tube that had fallen on the subway floor. He wanted to quickly learn the skill he just got, but something was already holding his dark night coat, then swung Clyde backward. Buick. Clyde hit the wall above the railroad tracks. He fell on the rail rocks hard. Due to the sudden jolt, the silver tube containing the skill he had just obtained fell. Shit! Clyde cursed. Because he was grinding his teeth, the curse came out as a hiss. Dio! He immediately stood up and drew the elder glass sword from its scabbard. Then his eyes darted around looking for the figure of his attacker. But strangely, Clyde didn't see anything. He didn't even hear any sound as a sign of his attacker's whereabouts. Clyde thought that what had attacked him earlier was definitely a Wendigo. But he had no idea that the Wendigo would be that powerful. Is that a Wendigo of a different color? The thought crossed Clyde's mind. The attacker, if it was really a Wendigo, was quite strong. And it also could move with such speed. Clyde hoped that it was the Wendigo that had a different color. Because if an ordinary Wendigo had that much power, then it would be really bad. Because he didn't see anything appear and attacked him again, Clyde dared to step towards the place where his silver tube had fallen. Clyde's eyes glanced around the dark corners at the end of the railroad tracks, waiting for whoever will appear from within that dark shadow. As soon as Clyde was one step away from reaching the silver tube, he heard the sound of rapid footsteps coming from the dark alley of the railroad tracks. Clyde, who had expected this follow-up attack to happen, immediately turned his body towards the sound. He saw a grey figure moving towards him. It turned out that not only one was charging toward him but there were 5 of them. Cock! One of the 5 skinny grey creatures jumped at Clyde with a disturbing scream. Clyde slashed the elder glass sword toward the creature. The bluish blade of the sword greeted the Wendigo's arrival with its incredible sharpness. Crot! The elder glass sword's blue blade sliced through the Wendigo's head with ease, like a knife cutting butter. Clyde didn't even feel any pressure when he split that grey creature's head. Red and grimy blood also splashed after the Wendigo's head was split open. Its body fell next to Clyde with a disturbing sound. The other 4 Wendigos stared at Clyde with their piercing yellow eyes. Their body resembles that of a human, but their limbs were so skinny that there are only bones and skin remained. And the length of their limbs is near twice the length of a normal human's limbs. The first impression Clyde got from meeting them was that they were weak monsters but have high speed. Even though he could easily kill a Wendigo with one slash of his sword, Clyde couldn't rest easy because the difficulty level might suddenly go up. The Wendigos who appear to have anorexic bodies can become very strong in a short time, according to the wishes of anyone who manipulated this apocalypse setting. Clyde glanced briefly at the silver tube under his feet. Then he directly activated his skill. Burning Hand, LV.10, is activated. ******. Clyde shot fire at the Wendigos. Then he lowered his body and picked up the silver tube on the floor. Caca! They let out heartbreaking screaming sounds. From that sound, Clyde thought they were burning in Clyde's flames from a skill that was at level 10. But it turned out that Clyde was wrong. The 4 Wendigos leaped through the flames, extending their clawed hands toward Clyde. Clyde was of course taken aback by the unexpected thing they did. He almost let his guard down and let the claw hit him. But Clyde swung the elder glass sword swiftly to slash the Wendigo's arm as he jumped backward. Their hands fell on the floor. But a moment later, their hands instantly grew back. The regeneration process was so outrageous that it seemed as if there was no pause from the time the hand was cut off until it grew back. That is crazy! Clyde screamed internally. Not only that, but their burned skin also began to recover. Even though it seemed to take longer than the recovery from the slash wound, it was still an amazing regeneration. They didn't waste time and immediately charged toward Clyde together. It looks like the way to kill them is simply to destroy or cut their heads. Clyde immediately opened the silver tube he just got in a hurry. Luckily he managed to open the lid before the Wendigos reached him. A white light accompanied by a bit of electricity appeared and entered Clyde's body. After that, he immediately threw the tube with all his might toward one of the Wendigos. Back! The silver tube hit the Wendigo's face hard and threw it backward. 3 of its friends don't seem to care about it. They are still charging with incredible ferocity. Clyde, who has finished learning his newly purchased skill, is ready to fight them now. He knew that the way to kill them was to strike them in the head. So he will do that. However, Clyde didn't realize that reinforcements from the Wendigos would appear from behind him. Long, thin, grey hands held Clyde's arms and legs. Shit! As if all of that wasn't bad enough, those hands were also holding his neck. All those skinny grey hands held Clyde so he couldn't move. Meanwhile, the 3 Wendigos in front of him drew closer. The Wendigo that he had thrown with the silver tube had also lunged at him again. Let's try the skill now. Clyde just got a skill called Pure Lightning. If indeed the skill lived up to its name, then it should be able to help him escape from this situation. Chapter 66 New Skills. The abnormally long, grey, and skinny hands gripped Clyde's arms, legs, and neck. There seemed to be so many of them that Clyde could no longer estimate their number. Meanwhile, the 4 Wendigos in front of him lunged at Clyde with their jagged mouths already open. Get ready to tear his flesh. Pure Lightning, LV.1, is activated. At that critical moment, Clyde thought that the only way he could survive was to use the skill he had just acquired. As soon as he activated that skill, Clyde felt his whole body filled with a tingling surge of power. It felt as if there was an electric current running through every inch of his cells. Clyde's body was flowing with brilliant bluish-white lightning energy. Then the lightning spread in all directions and stung the Wendigos that were holding onto him and the 3 Wendigos that were charging at him from the front. *****************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************่ The Wendigos didn't look stung them, the Wendigos didn't look like they were in pain. They only looked shocked for a moment as the flash of lightning dazzled them. But that was enough for Clyde. With that skill, Pure Lightning, he had managed to escape from the clutches of the Wendigos behind him. This skill apparently can also affect Clyde's movement speed besides creating a flash effect that blinds them. Coupled with his stats that have been maxed out, Clyde was able to avoid that dangerous situation in the blink of an eye. He was now about 10 meters from where he had been. The stair to go up to the surface is not far behind him. The Wendigos let out screams from their ravaged throats, so that their screams sounded disturbing and heartbreaking at the same time. I will upgrade skill, Pure Lightning to level 10. In his mind, Clyde immediately upgraded the skill that had helped them the skill to the max because it was obvious that the skill would be very useful in this situation. You upgraded Pure Lightning to level 10. Skill, Pure Lightning has reached max level. Clyde clenched his fists. A savage grin appeared on his face. Now, let's the real fight begin. Kaok. 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 The Wendigos let out an ugly scream almost simultaneously. After that, they charged at Clyde with extraordinary ferocity. Their numbers had clearly increased a lot from before. Clyde didn't have time to count them all, but he estimated that there were now more than a dozen Wendigos for him to face right now. Pure Lightning, LV.10, is activated. *JJZZRRRTTT. *. Lightning covered Clyde's entire body, the lightning flash spread and dazzled the entire subway that was originally pretty dark. Clyde also channeled the lightning energy into the Elder Glass sword. The blade instantly absorbed his lightning power. The translucent bluish blade gave off a brilliant white light and discharges of electricity. *JJJZZZTTTT. The distinctive buzzing sound of moving electricity appeared when Clyde moved. With his stats and power from skill, Pure Lightning, Clyde's movements became much faster than before. In the blink of an eye, Clyde was already in front of the Wendigos and slashed his Elder Glass sword. *Srot. *. *Srot. *. *. Clyde swung the Elder Glass sword, slashing at the Wendigos in an imperceptibly smooth motion. Only visible white flash movements can be seen moving so fast when Clyde slashes his sword. Moments later, Clyde had already managed to slash the heads of a dozen Wendigos. Their grey and bald heads fell to the floor of the subway and railway with splashes of blood. In the midst of that gruesome sight, Clyde's figure stood with a body still flowing with brilliant white lightning. After making sure there weren't any Wendigo left, Clyde deactivated his skill, Pure Lightning. The white lightning disappeared from his body slowly. Clyde grinned in satisfaction. This is a good skill, he muttered to himself. You gain 30, x1, exp. You gain 30, x1, exp. You gain 30, x1, exp. Clyde gets the same amount of notifications as the number of Wendigos he just killed. However, there is something different there. Oh, I see. At level 1, I will only gain exp multiplied by 1. Then when I upgrade it to level 10, I will gain exp multiplied by 10. A wide grin returned to Clyde's lips. To think he would find skills like this was ridiculous. Doesn't that mean that if a player discovers that he or she has this skill, he or she can be said to have some sort of cheat? But I don't know. The setting of this apocalypse has probably been messed up in such a way that this kind of skill exists. Even if he had those skills, Clyde couldn't let his guard down. Because you never know what will happen in this apocalypse. Let's not waste time. Clyde hurried off down the dark alley where trains usually passed. He now knew that the Wendigos were hiding in dark places. Even though it was still early in the morning, Clyde couldn't relax because he didn't know how long it would take him to find the 3 Wendigos of different colors. He also had no idea how strong they were or how long it would take him to defeat them. So, moving as if there was no time left was the best decision Clyde could make in this situation. Clyde walked down the dark tunnel for several minutes. But he didn't find anything. This is pretty weird because Clyde is almost sure there will be a Wendigo hiding in here. Clyde can even see the light from the end of the tunnel which indicates the end of this tunnel. But he found nothing. Could they be in that tunnel over there? Clyde wondered while looking back. Then without thinking he dashed the way he had come and into the tunnel on the other side. Clyde finally heard the Wendigo's whereabouts. As he plunged deeper into the darkness, the Wendigos attacked him from all sides. Clyde entered battle mode by activating skill, Pure Lightning, so he could quickly kill them. Chapter 67 Meet Again. Agatha finally managed to stand up. After a day and a night of unbearable torment, and several more hours of recovery that seemed forever, Agatha was finally able to stand up again. Her body condition cannot be said to be fine. However, it is still much better than before. Agatha's face was still pale. Her hair was in mess and tangled. Agatha looks like a woman who still has a hangover from heavy drinking. Lucho, who was reading a book on the couch, suddenly said, "Are you ready to go?" Agatha stared at Lucho with sharp eyes. Everything he did to her was still clear in her head. In fact, Agatha won't forget that for a long time. Maybe forever. In her heart, Agatha harbored a huge feeling of revenge. Something like lava frozen at the base of a volcano and waiting for the right moment to erupt. "Yes, Senior," answered Agatha. "Good. It's been too long anyway," Lucho said. Without saying anything else, Agatha walked towards the only door in the white room. "It looks like someone else is messing around with this apocalypse setting. You have to be careful," Lucho said. Agatha only answered with a nod. But Lucho didn't even take his eyes off the book he was reading. Agatha gritted her teeth. Yet she knew better not to say anything. Agatha continued her steps towards the door. The double doors opened to both sides, allowing Agatha to come out. As soon as she came out, the double doors closed again. At that time Lucho looked up from his book and stared at the door where Agatha had disappeared. Then he turned towards the monitor screen. Worry was clear on Lucho's face. "Too many disturbances on the selection stage this time," he muttered. "It's not good. It's all because of that brat." On the monitor screen, Lucho was watching Clyde fighting the Wendigos. No, to be more precise, he was slaughtering them since the fight seemed one-sided. As soon as Clyde got his new skills, his strength, which was already too strong beyond the limits of this chapter, increases again. Lucho felt regretful that he had not observed Clyde from the start. So he couldn't know what exactly had made Clyde so strong. His weapon and the number of coins he had from the start were what amazed Lucho. Where did he get all that? Lucho only realized something strange about Clyde when he was already at a very high level. So he has missed all the things that made it so easy for him to reach that high level. TCH, if only this damn system could be more sophisticated. Lucho cursed the system he currently had. If only he had higher funds, then Lucho could have bought an even better selection stage system. Unlike the system he had bought for this cheap price. Apart from this system being unable to track players according to his will, this system is also very vulnerable so that interference from outside parties can enter easily. Lucio took a deep breath. What has happened has already happened. So he can't do anything about it. Lucho stared at the screen floating in front of him. The screen now shows that Clyde has killed every Wendigo he encounters. The last time he saw that about 100 Wendigos were attacking him from all sides when he noticed his presence. Yet Clyde can take them out in less than a minute. His body was still enveloped in a stream of white lightning that Lucho remembered as skill, pure lightning. The price of the skill was very expensive. But Clyde could even afford that skill and one more skill, he didn't know what. Again, it was due to the selection stage system he was currently using. Several lines of notification that he had leveled up appeared in Clyde's eyes. He smirked, realizing how much EXP he had gotten after killing dozens of Wendigos and upgraded skill, EXP plus to max level. Now when he looked at his character information, Clyde felt delighted because he was already at level 65. The combination of the experience he previously gained and the experience he was gaining now had him at that level. Haha! Clyde laughed. He let happiness envelop him for a moment after being confused and restless since yesterday. Since he got this quite overpowered skill, EXP+, Clyde felt quite assured that he could pass what was in front of him. Clyde continued on his way. Unfortunately, he didn't know where to look for the Wendigo in the green, blue, and red colors. Are there no clues scattered around here? If he just randomly searched all of them, Clyde didn't know when he would find them. At this moment he regretted not asking Gremory in more detail about how to find the 3 Wendigos she wanted. In the end, Clyde got out of the subway station and decided to look for the Wendigos around the city. Clyde circled the city for a few minutes, then the hunger came. Even though it seemed like it hadn't been an hour since he had breakfast at the motel. So Clyde took out a pack of bread from his inventory and started eating while looking for clues. He didn't expect to meet Agatha here. Clyde's chewing stopped automatically. He stared at Agatha for a few moments. He noticed that Agatha's face looked much paler than the last time he saw her. Agatha was sitting on a chair. She turned to Clyde and Clyde could see her tired-looking eyes. "What's going on?" Clyde asked. "You look like a dying person." Agatha just sighed because what Clyde said wasn't too far from the truth. "Come sit with me," Agatha said. This time she didn't even use her real voice because she wanted to save energy to recover. Why? Clyde asked. Do you always ask so many questions? Agatha said in a tired tone. It's up to you if you don't want to sit down. In the end, after reasonable deliberation, Clyde chose to remain standing while eating his bread. Chapter 68 New Deal. Agatha looked at Clyde with lazy eyes. Her feelings were clearly shown on her pale face. You won't sit with me? She asked. No, Clyde replied curtly. Then took a bite of his bread. Why do you want to see me? There were sighs from Agatha. Then she leaned back on the back of the chair. I've just had a tough day, Agatha said. So the World Master also had a hard day, hey? Clyde replied. Yet. I thought that after becoming a human, I wouldn't find it difficult to go through everything anymore. Agatha looked at Clyde. I want to make an offer. You get to the point? I heard when someone just had a bad day they want to tell their story to someone who's going to listen, Clyde replied. Wanna talk? Agatha smiled and let out a chuckle. If I'm not mistaken, I would think of you as a caring person. However, I know that you just want whatever information you can get. Clyde didn't change his expression. But inside he was a little disappointed because Agatha couldn't say what had made her day so hard. Something that could make a world master has a bad day was definitely not something trivial. And clearly related to this apocalypse. Whatever it actually is. But Clyde wasn't really that disappointed. Because he had expected that Agatha wouldn't be that stupid to say anything. What kind of offer? Clyde finally asked to the point knowing he couldn't get any more information. We will offer you powers so that you can go through the Selec, this apocalypse more easily, Agatha said. Clyde's forehead twitched because he realized something had slipped out of her tongue. What do you think? I don't think I really need it, Clyde said. Especially if I completed the personal request from the Grimoire and obtained information from her. Given that, Clyde thought that it seemed like he was better off not saying anything about his encounter with the Demon Duchess. But Agatha smiled and snorted. As if she had expected that Clyde would say that. You must think you're strong enough now, Agatha said. However, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. There are still 3 days before this is over, you know. Anything can happen. Clyde frowned. You manipulated this apocalypse so that many strange things happened. Then you forced me to obey you or I couldn't get through it. Is that it? Agatha had heard from Lucho that someone was manipulating the selection stage. That's not us, Agatha said. But Clyde looked at her as if to say he couldn't believe it. Believe me. We are not the ones who manipulated this apocalypse. We are also confused about who did it, Agatha said. Whatever. Clyde realized that he had spent too long here. I don't have time, so I'll just say that I can't accept your offer right now. Maybe later, or tomorrow, you can see me again. Clyde walks past Agatha. Agatha looked at him with a frown. Where exactly is he going? Hey, wait. Agatha got up and followed Clyde. Why did you refuse my offer so easily? The reason is quite simple. I don't want to become a slave to world masters or a party like you. I know quite a lot that in an offer like this, I will be the one who loses. Even if I'm successful to do the things you wanted, said Clyde as he continued walking. Damn it! Agatha cursed inside her head. Why does there have to be someone like this again in the selection stage? But at least I have to get him now. All right. Agatha stepped in front of Clyde and blocked his path. I'll offer you something that won't cost you anything. Clyde snorted. Oh yeah? What is that? It's kind of a quest. So if you manage to do this you'll get a good reward. But if you fail, you have nothing to lose. Is this a personal request? Thought Clyde. From what he heard, it did sound like Agatha wanted to give him a personal request. What's that? Clyde asked in an even tone. Agatha then stretched her hand to the side of her head. After that, a window that looks the same as the usual window in this apocalypse appears. Unlike Grimoire's window, the personal request window that Agatha pointed out didn't look like something that came from outside this apocalypse's system. In that window, there is only one personal request. You have received a personal request from World Master Agatha. World Master Agatha's personal request. 1 kill 1000 Wendigos. Clyde frowned and put on an incredulous look on his face. Even though it's only one, that personal request sounds quite hard. 1000 Wendigos? Clyde asked while looking at Agatha. Are you serious? Agatha smiled awkwardly. That's a lot. But you will get a handsome reward if you manage to finish it. What's that? We can offer high-grade weapons, skills, coins. I will do it if you want to answer my question, Clyde cut in before Agatha could finish her sentence. Agatha blinked her eyes a few times. What do you want to ask? The things about this apocalypse. Agatha closed her mouth and pressed it together. She didn't think that Clyde would want that. Why? She asked. I just wanted to know. Agatha seemed to think about it for a few moments. If he manages to complete that, then I can get quite a lot of tokens. It's not enough to cover my tokens that have been stolen by Lucho. But it's still better than not getting anything. But if he succeeds, he will demand the answers he wants and get to know about what really happened behind this apocalypse. Agatha glanced at Clyde, who was also staring at her. Could I take that risk? You still thinking? Didn't I tell you that I don't have much time? Clyde said. Clyde then walked past Agatha. Arg. For my token's sake, I'll take that risk. Agatha ran back to Clyde. All right. I agree, said Agatha. Chapter 69 Refusal? Agatha ran and stopped again in front of Clyde. Okay, I agree. Clyde already knew that Agatha would most likely agree. He wasn't 100% sure. But Clyde realized that the look on Agatha's face conveyed an urgency about something Clyde didn't know about. This offer seems quite important for Agatha and her World Master friends. You may ask after you complete my personal request, Agatha said. Clyde nodded. If I don't finish it, I won't suffer any consequences, right? Yeah, but you won't receive any reward either, Agatha replied. Clyde shrugged. I'm fine with that. Agatha felt a little uncomfortable with this situation. Why does this situation seem to indicate that Clyde is the one who has the advantage to make a bargain with her? After all, he's just a player. But, Agatha realized that the situation was indeed true. Right now, because her token has been used by Lucho without her permission, making her the party that needs Clyde, who is just an ordinary player, to look for tokens for her. Of course, Clyde didn't know anything about that. If he knew what a personal request really was, he would have demanded better. Besides, this must also be the first time he's heard of this personal request, Agatha thought. Okay. I will complete your personal request, Clyde said. How am I going to contact you once I've finished? Agatha looked confused. She looks like she hasn't thought all this through properly and just made a decision on the spur of the moment, Clyde thought. Then Agatha pulled something from the back pocket of her shorts pants and held it out to Clyde. It was a plain black ring. The ring looked simple, but Clyde could see that there was gold writing on the inner ring. This is a valuable thing that belongs to me. I am giving it to you so you can contact me later, Agatha said. Clyde accepted the ring. Then the ring instantly disappeared into his inventory. Agatha didn't give any comments about Clyde, who didn't ask first whether he should wear the ring or just keep it. As if Clyde never intended to wear the ring no matter what. Clyde's stomach suddenly growled. His hunger had returned even though Clyde had just finished his bread. Agatha can't help but let out a chuckle. Haha. This chapter is quite annoying. Have you brought any food? Clyde only answered with a nod. Agatha grinned at Clyde. I'm not sure the amount of food you have in your inventory will be enough to keep you going. Even for a few hours. You don't have to worry about that. Clyde said it with an even tone and an unbothered expression on his face. That made Agatha frown. Do you know what you're going through today? She asked. He had already fought Wendigos in the subway. But that should only give him information about the monsters he will face. However, Clyde looked as if he already knew about the hunger he was about to face. I'm going to start looking for Wendigos now. You've wasted so much of my time here, Clyde said. Clyde didn't answer Agatha's question. And because Agatha knew the urgency of this personal request, she chose not to waste Clyde's time anymore. 1,000 Wendigos is a lot. Even for players with a level as high as Clyde. All right. Good luck, said Agatha. Then Clyde walked past her. Agatha stared at Clyde's back, which was getting away. Apparently, Lucho's laziness gave me an advantage, thought Agatha. By meeting Clyde in person, she could make a clandestine deal like this. And Agatha knew that the system they had for the selection stage was outdated, so she could take advantage of it. Agatha grinned. If this all went smoothly, then she would be able to get her revenge on Lucho after what he did to her. But she couldn't rush things or the plan would go awry. The double doors opened to two different sides just like before when she came out. Now Agatha has returned to the White Room. She stepped inside and let the double doors close behind her. Lucho on the other hand was still reading the book he had been reading solemnly earlier. "How's it going?" Lucho asked, still without taking his eyes off his book. "He turned it down," Agatha replied. Agatha walked over and sat on the couch next to Lucho. In her heart, Agatha still felt fear when she was next to him. Of course, she would feel scared after being chained for that long by Lucho. The image and pain when the chains ensnared her and penetrated her flesh slowly are still fresh in her head. She gulped. And chill run down her spine. But Agatha tried not to show anything in front of Lucho. She tried to act normal as if she didn't feel anything anymore. After all, she was sure that Lucho wouldn't care either. Lucho only looked up after a while. What he read in the book seemed so interesting that he couldn't hear Agatha's answer right away. "What do you say?" Lucho asked with a frown of surprise. He closed his book with a loud sound. "Ed." Agatha looked at Lucho. "Yes," he refused. Agatha saw Lucho's jaw tighten. That sight made her feel as if her heart wanted to jump. Agatha saw the same sight before Lucho took out his chains that time. "What exactly are you offering him?" Lucho asked. "As usual we offer skills, coins, weapons," answered Agatha. "And he refuses." "Maybe he feels he can survive well with his own power," Agatha said. Lucho clicked his tongue. "Because of this garbage system, we can't monitor him properly. We can't even see his character information." Agatha was silent while looking at Lucho. Inwardly she smiled. Lucho wouldn't know that she just gave her personal request to Clyde because she did something to the system. "This is a good start. Just wait until I rank up and I'll pay you back for what you did to me." Chapter 70 Questioning. Clyde continued to walk around the city while eating bread. Until now he had finished 5 packs of bread within 10 minutes. Here he no longer sees any survivors, which indicate that most likely most of the city's residents are dead. Viewed from any angle, this apocalypse is indeed very heavy for ordinary humans. There shouldn't be any humans who could survive even the first day. Now that the third day has come, Clyde believes that the only remaining humans living in this city might just be himself, his group members, and one other group that Clyde doesn't know where they are now. When he looked up, the grey clouds were moving again. They had not yet covered the sun, but the morning atmosphere was already dark. Clyde even believed that it might rain today. Heavy rain and storms will hit this already gloomy and ruined city. Perhaps the rain would wash away the scattered corpses of humans and monsters. Maybe this world will be destroyed on the 6th day, Clyde muttered to himself as he glanced around. Whatever happens to Clyde or the rest of his group, this world will surely meet its fate. That is the destruction that has been talked about since day one. After that, what will happen to me? That was the question Clyde most wanted to know the answer to. Because of that he always intended to exchange whatever was offered to him and replace it with answers to pieces of information he could get. If Clyde doesn't know anything about what will happen, then he will only be a slave who is used by anything who has power over this apocalypse. World Masters and Celestials. Particularly, Clyde wants to know what they really are. After all, he could still get skills, coins, and experience from hunting monsters and completing night quests. There's nothing to worry about that. Clyde heard a growl and quick footsteps as he passed a building. The building was quite low, maybe only 5 or 6 floors. All the curtains were closed so that no sunlight came in. A place where the Wendigos would most likely hide. Clyde pulled the elder glass sword from its scabbard and walked toward the building. While in his heart he hoped to find one of the 3 different colored Wendigos he had to kill. When he went inside, the building was completely dark. Luckily, Clyde managed to pick up a flashlight at a shop he had just passed. Clyde turned on his flashlight and looked for the light switch. He expected some attack to come at him when he turned on the flashlight. But nobody came. Even so, Clyde was sure that there was a Wendigo here. His instincts told him so. Click. As soon as Clyde pressed the switches, the lights in the room turned on almost simultaneously, turning a dark room into a bright one. Kaak. Hearing the disturbing screams, Clyde wasn't scared but grinned instead. The flashlight disappeared back into his inventory and he was ready to fight. A Wendigo jumped onto the table from under it. It stared at Clyde with those yellow eyes. Not long after, the herd came. They emerged from cupboards, under desks, and from the stairs leading up. NBSP, Oh! There were about 20 of them on this floor. If there are that many on this floor, it's possible that I'll encounter almost the same number on another floor. Then at least Clyde would get enough Wendigo to fulfill Agatha's personal request target. The Wendigos lunged at Clyde with their thin, clawed grey arms. Clyde gripped the hilt of the elder glass sword tightly. Then approached them. He decided not to use skill, pure lightning directly because it would only drain his magic power faster. Instead, Clyde used his fighting strength and the sharpness of the elder glass sword in his hand. For now, Clyde felt like he could still face them as long as he wasn't cornered. In their room, Asksa and Sonia are daydreaming while eating potato chips. Their mouths never seem to stop chewing. Coupled with the hunger that keeps coming, the two girls felt that they could never stop chewing. Is it true that we really can't get fat, hey? Sonia asked, staring at the piece of potato chips in her hand. Asksa turned and looked at Sonia in disbelief. Are you still thinking about that? Sonia looked back at her. You don't know how hard it is when you are fat? You'll be bullied and told you look like a pig. Asksa flinched and put on a horror face. That's probably the most unimaginable thing for you, Sonia added. Yes, of course Asksa never imagined that he would be treated like that. Since a long time ago her body was always skinny and not too tall. She is often referred to as a girl who looks like a doll. You say that as if you've felt it before, Asksa said. Sonia sighed. Her eyes stared at the far side as if looking at the bleak past. I have, Sonia said. I used to be that fat girl and was called like that pig. Asksa is surprised because she doesn't see those marks on Sonia's body now. Sonia chuckled. I tried so hard to diet and exercise to get this body. Sonia pulled her shirt and showed her belly. Sonia widened her eyes seeing the ABS on Sonia's stomach. Fortunately I'm still young. So my body can still change quickly, Sonia said while covering her stomach again. Asksa couldn't say much. Maybe I should also start training my body. What do you think about Clyde? Suddenly, Sonia asked. Aska looked up at him. What do you mean? Asksa asked. Sonia turned to her. Why didn't Clyde take us? And I think he's been keeping secrets from us. Asksa was silent and stared at Sonia for a few moments. I can't understand it. Sonia shook her head. Sometimes he can look like he wants to help us. But sometimes he gives off the impression that he might leave us at any moment. Chapter 71 Found Jacob. Learning what Sonia said, Asksa felt a bit of annoyance rising by itself in her heart. Asksa wanted to immediately refute Sonia's words and say that what she said was not true. However, Asksa immediately realized that what Sonia said actually made sense. She also felt it when she saw Clyde turning his back on them after finishing his breakfast earlier. She had opened her mouth a little and wanted to throw a rebuttal to Sonia. But Asksa immediately closed her mouth again. You do realize that, right? Sonia asked, looking at Asksa. I think. Asksa said. I think he has his reasons. Yeah, I hope that reason is because he doesn't want to see us get hurt, Sonia replied. But I don't fully believe that. Asksa was silent and stared blankly ahead. She ignored her returning hunger. While Sonia was beside her and stared at Asksa's face which seemed to be daydreaming. She was clearly thinking about what she had just said. She looks like an innocent girl who doesn't know anything, Sonia thought, looking at Asksa. Ah, damn it. I thought it wouldn't be this complicated. They had only been together for 3 days. Yet Sonia already feels a kind of bond with Asksa. Asksa looks like a little sister that she has to protect. That's how Sonia feels about her. Even though Sonia already knows that in a world like this, she can't develop a bond like that with anyone. She was supposed to be with them only for the sake of her own survival. That's what Sonia thought from the beginning she saw Clyde and Asksa on the subway that time. She just wanted to take advantage of them. But it seems everything is different now. Whatever. Sonia tossed her empty bag of potato chips and sank down on the bed. Decided not to think about it any further because it would only torment her. I'd better sleep. Sonia returned to her habits. Namely sleeping when her mind is full of complicated things that she can't find the solution to. Asksa only glanced at Sonia but didn't say anything. Inside her head, Asksa was praying that what Sonia was saying, and what was now starting to make sense to her, would not come true. If that happened, how would she survive in this chaotic world in the future? On the other hand, Clyde is fighting to kill Wendigos in that abandoned building. Now he has arrived at the 4th floor. Clyde stopped counting how many Wendigos he had killed. But he remembered getting the level up notification 2 more times. So now he is at level 67. Clyde took a deep breath after he finally finished off all the Wendigos on this floor. He looked up and the room's light illuminated his face, which was decorated with Wendigo's pale red blood. The sound of his stomach sounding very loud was heard again. Clyde took a cheeseburger from his inventory, then sat down on a chair and placed the elder glass sword on his lap. "I haven't found it yet," Clyde complained while starting to chew his cheeseburger. He glanced at the clock, which coincidentally still worked. It's now 7:41 am. Actually, it was still very early in the morning. But once again, Clyde can't help but feel anxious because he doesn't know when he will actually find the Wendigo with the green, blue, and red colors. As for the personal request from Agatha, Clyde is sure he can kill 1000 Wendigo before this chapter ends. Now he had even killed a total of 230 Wendigos since receiving that personal request. Clyde finished his cheeseburger in no time. Then he took a drink from the dispenser with a full gallon on the floor. This building is small. So one floor is only filled by one room, which is like an office. It makes things easier for Clyde's search. He climbed the stairs leading to the 5th floor, which was most likely the last floor. Unexpectedly, at that place he found a Wendigo figure sitting on a chair. Its body seemed bigger and more muscular than the Wendigo that Clyde had previously met. The Wendigo looks like a muscular human with a bald head and yellow eyes. An Alpha D. OM. The thing that made everything even more shocking was that it has dark green skin. "Hey," the Wendigo said in the voice of a normal grown man. The way it looked at Clyde, who had just come up from the stairs, was also very sane, unlike the other Wendigos who only stared with their yellow eyes that reflected hunger. Clyde, of course, did not answer the green-skinned Wendigo's greeting. He was busy observing with a frown of astonishment. "Can you help me?" the green Wendigo asked. "I felt very hungry this morning. And I don't remember what happened. As soon as I woke up, I saw my body had become like this." Clyde was really confused. He couldn't even reply to the words of the green Wendigo. What the actual fuck? Clyde thought in shock. "Did you hear me?" the green Wendigo asked again. Clyde took a deep breath, trying to calm down as much as possible from the shock. "Calm down, Clyde. You found your target. Didn't you hear anything from downstairs?" Clyde was finally able to ask the green Wendigo again. I don't know," it said. Although the green Wendigo looks sane, it doesn't look quite right. It looks confused. There may still be some humanity left in its brain, but it's still turned into a Wendigo. Clyde, who had woken up from his shock, realized that there were pieces of Wendigo's body around the green Wendigo. And the number of body parts was quite a lot. Clyde stared at the green Wendigo. He wondered how the green Wendigo could still speak and act, almost, like a human. "You really don't remember anything?" Clyde asked. The green Wendigo shook his head. "No. You have a name?" "Jacob." Surprisingly, the green Wendigo said its name. Chapter 72, Finishing Jacob. At this point, it's clear what Clyde should do. He walked closer to the green Wendigo. Her footsteps were slow and careful so as not to trigger it and attack him. At least before he got any closer. Inspection, LV.3, is activated. Clyde tried to see how the information from the green Wendigo was. Viewed from anywhere, that green Wendigo was an anomaly even in the midst of this apocalypse. Monster information. Name, Green Wendigo. Affiliation, Undead Monsters. Level, 47. Skills, Scream, LV.5, Healing Factor, LV.3. Stats, Strength, 7, Stamina, 5, Agility, 7, Magic Power, 3. Weaknesses. Affinities. Rating, A, C. This monster's level is almost the same as the Corpsebringer Dragon and the 2 huge zombie berserkers that became the boss yesterday, just a bit higher. So, this green Wendigo might not be a monster that players should be able to kill. However, like yesterday, he would kill that Wendigo now. And also 2 other Wendigos which are also anomalies. When Clyde was walking closer, suddenly the Wendigo's eyes moved to look at him. Those yellow eyes were piercing and now looked the same as how ordinary Wendigos stared. Lifeless and only filled with madness. "What are you going to do?" the green Wendigo, who said its name was Jacob, asked in a sharp tone. Clyde gripped the hilt of the elder glass sword tightly. He didn't say anything in answer to Jacob's question. Instead, Clyde lunged at it and slashed the elder glass sword with incredible speed and power. But Jacob managed to block the blade by raising its hand. The elder glass sword's blade dug into Jacob's green arm, pale blood flowing down. Jacob's yellow eyes stared at the arm impaled by the sword. Its jaw clenched and it gritted its teeth. You! Jacob turned back to Clyde and let out a growl. Why are you attacking me? You are a monster, bastard. What do you expect me to do? Replied Clyde in an even voice. Jacob's lips parted. Clyde could see rows of razor-sharp teeth that were finally exposed. Didn't I ask you to save me? Jacob shouted. Then it swung its hand to hit Clyde's chest. Buick. Clyde was pushed back several steps until he hit a wall. When he looked back up, Clyde saw that Jacob had already lunged at him. Hi arg. That voice still sounded like a normal human scream. It wasn't like a Wendigo scream with an already broken throat. Jacob swung its fist. Brake. The huge fist made a hole in the wall. Clyde had rolled onto his side so he didn't get hit. Clyde, who was already beside it, swung his elder glass sword. But once again Jacob raised his arm to hold his sword. The wound caused by the elder glass sword earlier had disappeared. Its skill, healing factor, is quite troublesome. Clyde didn't know how good its healing power was, which had reached level 3. If it proves to be able to heal Jacob's wounds in a very fast time, no matter how big the wound is, then Clyde really has to fight harder in this battle. Burning Hand, LV.10, is activated. Clyde stretched his hand towards Jacob, then let out fire at it. Asterisk swoosh. Asterisk. Arg. Jacob let out a loud scream. It was as if it was in pain because it had just received that burst of fire. Clyde drew his elder glass sword and then proceeded to slash it at Jacob again. Srot. Clyde slashed at its thigh. The slash knocked Jacob to its knees on the floor. Clyde, of course, immediately wanted to use this opportunity to slash it in the neck. However, Jacob stretched out his hand, which seemed to be a bit longer than before, and grabbed Clyde's leg. Jacob grabbed Clyde and then swung him against the wall. Buick. Jacob smashed Clyde against the wall. But he didn't finish there. Jacob then swung Clyde toward the rows of tables and chairs. Clyde's body that had violently thrown shattered the table and chairs. Splinters of wood fly in all directions. Shit, that bastard is pretty strong. Clyde winced at the pain from Jacob's grip on his leg. It turned out that the Wendigo with green skin was indeed stronger than the corpse-bringer dragon he had fought yesterday. Clyde struggled to his feet again. But when he looked up, Jacob's fist was right in front of his eyes. Buick. Clyde was thrown backward, then through a glass window behind him, and fell down from the 5th floor of the building. Clyde fell to the ground very hard. Luckily the dark night coat he was wearing lessened the pain he was receiving. When Clyde looked up, he saw Jacob jump from the window. Shit! Clyde cursed in his heart as he rolled away. Boom! Clyde managed to get away before Jacob landed its foot to stamp on Clyde's head. Grrhh! It groaned. Its yellow eyes now looked brighter than before. Jacob lunged at Clyde. Its large feet made a loud thump against the ground as it ran. Despite seeing the monster charging toward him, Clyde didn't look too worried. That monster was indeed quite strong. But Clyde also hasn't used all his strength yet. Pure Lightning, LV.10, is activated. Asterisk JZZRRTTTT. Asterisk. Bluish-white lightning came out and surrounded Clyde's body. Part of the lightning energy also flowed into the elder glass sword, causing the blade to be filled with streams of bluish-white lightning that flashed a brilliant white. ZZZTTTT. Clyde shot toward Jacob with incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, Clyde was already in front of Jacob and was swinging the elder glass sword almost without pause. Srot! Jacob's outstretched arms were about to catch him, flying after being slashed. Clyde, who was already behind Jacob, then slashed its back. Srot! Jacob's pale blood spurted and the green Wendigo slumped forward. However, Clyde saw that the arm that he cut earlier had begun to regenerate. Even though the speed was slower than the healing of the wound just now, it still looked impressive. Jacob charged back at Clyde even though the arm was still not fully healed. But Clyde was already moving to slash its leg. Srot! The lightning power covered elder glass sword's bluish blade and sliced through Jacob's leg smoothly. The slash also sent a stream of lightning up its body. Urgh! Jacob let out a scream of pain as part of its body was once again sliced. Open! And its body was stung by lightning. The screams sounded like the screams of a man who was in pain. Jacob fell to the ground. Immediately the leg that was cut off from the thigh began to heal itself. However, of course, Clyde will not let it. Still enveloped in the bluish-white lightning, Clyde turned his body towards Jacob as he swung the elder glass sword and chopped off its other leg. Craw! Jacob let out another scream of pain. Although the screams did sound like ordinary human screams in agony, Clyde didn't think so. To him, what came out of Jacob's mouth was nothing but a human-like scream that came from a monster's mouth. So he stays firm on what he has to do, which is to kill it as fast as possible. No. Wait. Jacob said while stretching its hand which was almost fully regenerated towards Clyde. Crayot. However, as if he didn't see it, Clyde slashed the hand again. Jacob screamed again. Clyde jumped on top of it. The light from the bluish-white lightning that covered Clyde's body dazzled Jacob's eyes. It couldn't see anything. All it saw was a rotating sight as its head detached from its body. Jacob's head fell not far from its body. For a few seconds, the green Wendigo's consciousness remained in its head. So that it can still see Clyde standing over its body. Clyde jumped down and deactivated skill, Pure Lightning. The streams of bluish-white lightning on his body and sword disappeared in an instant. Jacob looked up at Clyde who was staring at him from above with cold dark eyes. I asked you to help me. But you killed me instead, Jacob said in a low voice. You can't be saved anymore, Clyde said. Is that so? Jacob's yellow eyes closed slowly. Then close completely. The green Wendigo is dead and Clyde gets a notification written in pink on a black background. 1. The green Wendigo's killed, 1/1. Clyde gains no EXP from killing the green Wendigo. But he didn't mind. Clyde didn't know what kind of rules prevented him from getting EXP. But since he managed to complete one personal request, Clyde felt that it was enough. Of course, there was some reason Gremory wanted him to kill those 3 Wendigos of various colors. Even though he knew that there was a risk that he would just be used by Gremory, Clyde decided to take it because he would also gain valuable information. In a world like this, Clyde didn't expect that everything would turn out the way he wanted. But at least he intended to try to reduce the risk he would face as much as possible. Clyde felt his stomach growl again. It wasn't even 5 minutes from when he finished his cheeseburger. This is starting to get worrying, Clyde muttered to himself as he took another cheeseburger from his inventory. Then he walked over to look for Wendigos again while eating. I can't look for food anymore because everything has rotted. Actually, there is still quite a lot of food in his inventory. However, if this hunger came this fast, Clyde wasn't sure that there would be enough food. Chapter 73 From various sides. Lucho gritted his teeth. Even now his hands clenched tightly. This was something rare because normally Lucho always kept his cool. Agatha realized that his attitude had changed drastically. Inside her heart, Agatha also felt tensed. What if Lucho took out his anger on her? How did it happen? Lucho's question, which he asked in a cold and deep tone of voice, made Agatha flinch. What do you mean? She asked. How did he find that green Wendigo? Maybe he just happened to meet it. Then killed it, answered Agatha. Right. Agatha herself wasn't too sure either. Considering everything Clyde has done so far, it's possible that he was able to find and defeat the green Wendigo. No, Lucho said. I don't think so. Why do you think so? She asked. I've been paying attention to him since you met him. He seemed to have a specific purpose when he walked out of the motel this morning, Lucho replied. Agatha didn't say anything in response to Lucho's words. It's just that she wished that Lucho didn't check the details when she met Clyde. Agatha had indeed done something with the footage that appeared on the monitor when she met Clyde. With that, what actually appeared on the monitor earlier was Agatha making the offer she should have made to Clyde. Nothing about Agatha giving Clyde her own personal request. If Lucho knew, he could give her even worse torture. All of that is thanks to this very outdated selection stage system. Lucho leaned forward. His forehead creased and his eyes narrowed as he stared at the monitor screen. He had his full attention on Clyde. Agatha had never seen him act like this before. It made her feel a little scared. Because maybe Lucho would notice signs that Clyde wasn't just walking around and killing any Wendigo he happened to meet. But after a few minutes of staring at the screen, Lucho didn't budge. He said nothing more. Of course, Agatha didn't know what was in his head and what he was thinking when he looked at Clyde's figure on the screen. Could it be that he has encountered a celestial figure who intruded into this selection stage? Lucho muttered without taking his eyes off the screen. That possibility also crossed Agatha's mind. However, she didn't really care even if it was true. A word about Clyde might indeed have spread to the Celestials' realm. And knowing that they are powerful beings, Agatha is not surprised that they can find a way to infiltrate and contact Clyde through this outdated system. But Agatha thought that it was not too important for her to worry about. After all, they, World Masters, couldn't do anything if there were Celestials doing it since the stage selection system wasn't very useful. So Agatha just wants to take whatever she can get. When Clyde completes her personal request, she will get tokens. Lucho leaned back on the couch and looked thoughtful. Maybe I should see him. If I can get a player like him, I can use him and raise my rank, Lucho said. Agatha turned her eyes away from him and also stared at the screen. It won't be like that if I get it first. The place is dimly lit, illuminated only by the candles lining the walls. But that didn't matter to the figure of a woman who had just come through the door. She was already very familiar with this room. Even when she extinguished all the candles, the darkness would not bother her. Gremory folded her bat-like wings. She then stepped foot up the short stairway that led to her throne. She sat there with a satisfied smile on her face. He is good. I want him, Gremory muttered. A moment later from the shadows behind her throne, another figure stepped out. The figure wore a black robe that covered her entire body. A long tear in the thigh part of her robe, and her body curve indicate that she is a woman. You finally found the person you wanted, Your Grace, said the woman while kneeling in front of Gremory. Yes, Nimue. I will assign you to watch over him, Gremory said. Upon hearing Gremory's words, Nimue looked up. What do you mean, Your Grace? She asked. You should watch over him and show him the right path. With his strength, I think there will be other Celestials who will be attracted to him, Gremory replied. But, can I, who only a mere servant, be able to enter the selection stage? Nimue asked in a worried tone. Ha ha ha. Gremory laughed as if what she said was funny. You don't need to worry, Nimue. The system they used at the selection stage is trash. Even with your power, you should be able to infiltrate there easily. Hearing that, Nimue, who was worried before, now smiled. If Gremory had said that, then what she said must be true. If you say so, I will do the job well, Your Grace, Nimue said. Gremory nodded in satisfaction. You can leave now. And don't let yourself be found out. Remember, this human has a great ability. So, you should be extra careful watching over him. Nimue nodded once again. Then she got up and walked out of the room. Elsewhere, a man had just emerged from a golden-colored portal. The man wore a white cloth-like garment that was wrapped around his body and a golden sash that went from his left shoulder to his right waist. What made him noteworthy were his sandals, which were golden in color and gave off a golden and white glow. There was a pair of small wings flapping at the heels. The wings stopped flapping the moment the man stepped outside the portal. As soon as he came out of the portal, the man immediately ran towards a large door decorated with golden lines and arches. The door opened on its own as the man approached. He immediately went inside and slowed down his footsteps. Inside the room, there was a man who was lying down and watching something from the screen above him. The man had blonde curly hair that looked like a collection of golden clouds above his head. He was wearing white clothes that looked smooth and thick. When the man came inside, the man with blonde hair turned to him. What? Do you have anything to say? He asked. Your Majesty, said the man with great emphasis. His eyes were wide open as if indicating that he couldn't hold back the turmoil of the news he wanted to give. Seeing his servant's behavior, Hermes, the man with golden blonde hair, swept his hand and the screen above him disappeared. Then he sat up and looked at the man. What's wrong, Lycon? Hermes suddenly felt worried seeing the look on Lycon's face. He knew that the situation was not very good right now. The arrival of Lycon, who seemed to bring bad news, made Hermes get up and immediately pay full attention to him. He's the only one who knows about this problem. As the fastest god, of course, Hermes could notice that there was trouble somewhere much faster than anyone on Olympus. I just saw something good on a selection stage that is currently running, Your Majesty, Lycon said. Yeah? What is that? Hermes said impatiently. There is a candidate who looks quite promising. Hermes breathed a sigh of relief because the news Lycon brought him wasn't something he was worried about. Lycon, you know I'm not that interested in that. Hermes flopped down on his bed again. But this human is impressive, Your Majesty. I ask you to look at the selection stage itself. After that, Your Majesty can decide for yourself. Hermes sighed boredly. Fine. Just watch your back if this isn't interesting. Hearing Hermes' half-threatening tone, Lycon swallowed his saliva. But he was sure that what he was about to show would appeal to Hermes. So Lycon showed a show about the selection stage that happened in the world where he saw something that he thought was interesting. You were able to gain access to the selection stage system that easily? Hermes asked. Yes, Your Majesty. The world masters who run the selection stage in that world use an outdated system, replied Lycon. Hermes laughed. They're still using the old system, hey. A floating screen appeared before Hermes' eyes, showing the figure of a man dressed all in black fighting thin, grey-skinned creatures. No, what happened on the screen is more accurately described as a one-sided massacre. He's pretty great, Hermes commented. But I've seen one like that before. Why do you think I'd be interested in this one? Hermes looked at Lycon with an annoyed look, as if to say that he was wasting his time watching that man slay monsters. That man is already at a very high level, Your Majesty. On the third day, he is at level 68 now. He also has very expensive skills for players who are only on the third day. Hermes looked interested. Go on. His weapon is a grade A weapon that he got on the first day. Hermes frowned. Okay. That's quite interesting. Out of all the selection stages he had seen, Hermes had seen humans who were strong and able to survive well many times. Although in the end most of them were unable to succeed on the fifth day. However, he had never known a human with such an advantage. You have to keep an eye on him and give me information, Hermes said. Chapter 74 The Blue One. Phew. Clyde sighed. He looked up at the dark, overcast sky. I've lost count. He had killed enough Wendigos that he had forgotten how many he had killed. Clyde started walking again. The day is getting late but time is still very long for today. And his hunger still makes him anxious. Occasionally Clyde would get hungry even when he was fighting Wendigos. So he has to eat while swinging his sword. That's actually not a problem because Clyde can still do it well. But still, it's annoying. But all of that worried him. Even though he was sure he could fight the Wendigos, Clyde had to face the hunger that haunted him. Hunger is like a silent cold-blooded killer, who always watches behind his back and strikes at any moment. The moment when Clyde runs out of food, hunger will succeed in sticking the dagger into him. This is bad. How am I supposed to deal with this? Suddenly, when Clyde was feeling very worried about it, an unexpected help arrived. Private attribute, easy mode has been activated to counter the effects of hunger. Clyde immediately stopped in his place. What? What the hell? If it can be like that, why are you just activating it now? Clyde can't help but wonder. He didn't know what really happened until now. He thought all the effects of private attribute, easy mode had activated from the start. But who would have thought that the effect was only active now? Suddenly, there was another notification with a blue background and white text. Again, it's a notification that seems to be outside the system. We apologize for the late activation of the private attribute effect. Various things happened to limit our access to the system. Clyde shook his head. He didn't know why there could be so much outside interference on the system in this apocalypse. But then again, actually, there are still many things he doesn't know. Should I answer this apology or? After a few moments of thinking, Clyde finally chose to just ignore it. After all, the notification definitely won't wait for a reply from him. So now Clyde walks with a calm feeling. His hunger suddenly disappeared instead, he felt his stomach was quite full. Maybe this is the effect of the amount of food he has been devouring since earlier. Clyde continues on his way to find the rest of the Wendigos of different colors that he must kill. He searched every dark corner of the city. But all he found, in the end, was just ordinary Wendigos. Though, Clyde wasn't completely disappointed with that because he was still able to finish them off to complete Agatha's personal request. Time passed and it was now almost 11 o'clock in the afternoon. Damn it! Where the hell are those Wendigos? Clyde, in the end, felt so frustrated because he could not find them. He was beginning to feel that he would probably only complete one of the 3 personal requests Gremory had given. That's pretty disappointing. But that doesn't mean it's too bad because he doesn't have to pay anything even if he fails. And besides, he still has a personal request from Agatha. When it comes to her personal requests, Clyde is sure that he will be able to complete it. He walked more calmly now because there was no longer the influence of hunger that haunted him. A few minutes later Clyde finds a pack of Wendigos in a former factory building. Of course, he went straight in there and finished them off. Flashes of bluish-white lightning were seen from inside the factory, illuminating the darkness that previously filled it. Within 5 minutes, Clyde had managed to kill all the Wendigos in there. It turned out that there weren't as many Wendigos in the sizable factory as he had thought. Clyde checked Agatha's personal request window to see her progress so far. World Master Agatha's personal request: 1 kill 1000 Wendigos. 530/1,000. Clyde exhaled because he saw that there were still many he had to kill. No use complaining now. Let's just kill those skinny grey monsters. Clyde, who didn't want to waste time just complaining, continued to walk around the city. Nimue, with more suitable clothes to move quickly, has now arrived in this world. Nimue covered her head with a hood and mask, leaving behind a pair of dark eyes that looked mysterious. Her job now is to track down Clyde. Because Clyde was carrying Gremory's necklace, Nimue could track him more easily. He's over there. Nimue uses her powers to hide herself. Then she jumped over the buildings to reach Clyde's location. I don't feel any pressure here. It turns out that this system is indeed so outdated. At this rate, this system can no longer even be called functioning. A selection stage system that cannot block interference from outsiders. Then the system is only useful for running chapters of the selection stage and supervising the candidates. Even Nimue thought that maybe this system also couldn't keep an eye on the candidates properly. Inwardly she laughed. Those world masters are simply stupid. On the other hand, Lycon has also come to this world. Behind him, the golden portal closed as soon as he stepped on the ground. Okay, let's find that guy. The small pair of wings on the sandals he was wearing flapped lightly. Then in an instant, Lycon had just disappeared, accompanied, leaving a blurry golden trail. Clyde was still walking while looking around. He felt that he had walked very far from the motel that became his base for a while. Clyde feels a little bit of regret that he couldn't drive a car. That way he won't feel this bored because he's just walking. Clyde gasped at the unexpected sight before his eyes. Is that a woman? Clyde squinted his eyes and stared ahead, where there was a woman who was sitting on a chair. The woman was wearing a long brown coat that covered her body. She also wore high boots. She wears a black mask and dark glasses, as if to hide her face. Her hair is long, black and shiny. She also styled her hair in such a way as to cover her face. Clyde was confused. Who, or what, was that woman? Why is she dressed like that in this apocalypse? And why is she alone in the middle of the ruined city and the monsters' siege? She also didn't look like she was eating anything, even though there were attacks of increasingly intense hunger. All these questions were enough to make Clyde feel suspicious. So he held the hilt of the elder glass sword as he approached the woman carefully. Hey, Clyde said. The woman flinched in surprise and stood up. Clyde could feel her gaze from behind the dark glasses. Who are you? The woman asked. I'm just an ordinary survivor. Who are you? Clyde asked. Even so, Clyde knew from previous experience that she was most likely one of the Wendigos of a different color that he had to kill. Her encounter with Jacob the Green Wendigo made him know that there are Wendigos that can look and act like humans. Perhaps this woman was also one of them. My name is Candace, the woman answered. Listen, can you help me? Sure, Clyde replied. Take off your mask and glasses. The woman named Candace seemed nervous and was reluctant to open her mask. However, when she saw Clyde staring at her firmly, Candace chose to comply. I'll open it. But you have to promise not to be surprised, all right? Candace said. Upon hearing that, Clyde became even more convinced that she was one of the Wendigos that had a different color. Now it remains to see what color she actually is. Candace took off her mask and glasses. Finally, Clyde could figure out what color the woman was. It's blue. The woman who claims to be Candace is the blue Wendigo. I don't know what happened to me. Suddenly I woke up in this skin condition, Candace said in a trembling voice. She looked up to see Clyde. Candace's eyes immediately widened when she saw Clyde already lunging at her with a sword in hand. What are you doing? Candace screamed. Then she stomped on the ground in front of her and sent hundreds of ice spikes from where she was standing toward Clyde. The ice spikes looked like monster spikes coming out of the ground. Its crystal clear form made Clyde see the reflection of his face when the ice spikes drew closer to him. Clyde jumped sideways to avoid the ice spikes. But the ice spikes turned and followed him. So Clyde slashed the elder glass sword repeatedly to slash the ice spikes. Fragments of ice spikes flew into the air from Clyde's slash. Then suddenly the ice spikes' attack stopped after he destroyed them all. Clyde stood looking at Candace with cold eyes. Where she stood, Candace was also looking at Clyde. But the look in Candace's eyes conveyed surprise and anger. "What the fuck you think you're doing?" Candace shouted at Clyde. "Why are you attacking me?" "Because you are a monster," Clyde answered simply. Chapter 75 Troublesome Woman. Clyde has no idea why the reactions they all give are the same. They always look surprised when Clyde attacked them. Do they really not realize that they have become monsters like that? Can't they see the change in their form? Clyde couldn't stop thinking. "A monster? You think I'm a fucking monster?" Candace asked. She took off her glasses now. Revealed bright yellow eyes and blue skin. So she's the blue one. Clyde finally got his second target. The blue Wendigo turns out to be a woman. More precisely, used to be a woman. "I'm already turned like this. But I'm not a monster," Candace added. "Do you remember what happened before this?" Clyde asked. He also wanted to know what happened about why were Wendigos with different colors and different abilities were created. And why do they always have no memory of what happened before they changed? Candace looked confused. "I don't know. I forgot." Clyde had expected it. Like what he saw when meet that green Wendigo named Jacob. Candace also loses her memory. "Well then," Clyde said. "You know where this is going." Candace's eyes suddenly shot up at him quickly. "So you want to kill me? Isn't that pretty obvious?" replied Clyde. Candace was now standing straight. It was as if she no longer wanted to run away after Clyde had declared animosity. Clyde wonders if they are humans who were somehow turned into Wendigos, by something unknown. And they may still have their feelings or traits from when they were human. It is something very unique. And of course so cruel. At least those Wendigos with grey skin no longer remember anything but their hunger. However, the different colors Wendigos probably felt very miserable because they still had human consciousness and were afraid because their bodies had become like that. Clyde already knew that this apocalypse was something fucked up. But he didn't know that there would be humans who would suffer such a fate. Clyde felt some sympathy for them. But just a little. So, it wouldn't bother him to do what he had to do. Candace took off her mask and gritted her teeth. Clyde could finally see rows of sharp teeth that looked like spikes growing from her gums. "Now you understand," Clyde said. "I won't let you kill me." Candace threw a dozen ice spears at Clyde that shot through the air. Clyde, who didn't expect that she could do that, was shocked. He immediately activated his skill to deal with the attack. Burning Hand, LV.10, is activated. *swoosh. Clyde's left hand, which was not holding the sword, caught fire and he let out a torrent of fire toward the ice spears that were flying toward him. Instantly, the ice spears immediately disappeared because they were melted by the power of the fire. Candace, who looked like a woman in her 30s, groaned angrily. She gritted her teeth seeing her attacks countered by Clyde. So she immediately ran towards Clyde. Her footprints left a trail of ice behind. Candace's hands were encased in hardened ice enveloping her fists. Clyde, who noticed Candace approaching, transferred the power of skill, Burning Hand, into the elder glass sword, causing the bluish blade of the blade to glow with fire. Then Clyde approached her without fear. "Harg!" Candace screamed as she threw one fist at Clyde. Clyde blocked the fist with elder glass sword. Then he kicked Candace in the stomach, sending her flying backward. Clyde immediately caught up with her. With his stats already maxed out, Clyde can catch up to Candace in the blink of an eye in this short distance. Candace's eyes widened at his next to her. She also saw Clyde raise his flaming sword and swing it at her neck. Croc. The moment the flaming blade of the elder glass sword struck Candace's neck, the sound indicating it had hit something hard was heard. Clyde frowned in surprise. He should have been able to slash Candace's neck. However, a hard object appeared to block the blade. Ice. Clyde could see that there was already ice covering Candace's neck. Candace grinned at the look on Clyde's face. She created a dagger out of ice in her hand and immediately slashed it at Clyde. Tangug. Luckily, Clyde was still able to quickly raise the elder glass sword to block the ice dagger. Candace then reached out her other hand towards Clyde to hold his neck. But once again Clyde was still able to avoid it by jumping backward. Candace did not stop there. When Clyde was several meters away from her, she created ice spikes that seemed to appear from the ground at him. But Clyde was no longer worried about that. Since his skill, Burning Hand, was still active, Clyde swung the flaming elder glass sword and sent an attack in the form of a curved wall of flames toward the ice spikes. ****. The wall of fire that shot out from the elder glass sword collided with the ice spikes and melted them instantly. Pure Lightning, LV.10, is activated. Clyde's body was enveloped by bluish-white lightning and he immediately shot toward Candace through his wall of fire. ***JZZZZTTTT. In the blink of an eye, Clyde was right in front of Candace and immediately slashed the flame-covered elder glass sword at her with all his might. This time, Clyde used more power. Slash. ****. The slash was followed by flames burning from the wound it had inflicted. The fire instantly spread throughout Candace's body and devoured her. Clyde already felt that he had won after seeing Candace's body burn. However, when he didn't hear any screams coming out, Clyde immediately felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, Clyde saw white steam coming out of Candace's burning body. It is a sign of evaporation. Clyde immediately jumped back to guard and put out the flames. When the fire was gone, Clyde saw that all there were a few chunks of ice left. It's not her. Clyde glanced around. Based on what he saw, Candace had swapped her body with an ice clone she had created. What Clyde attacked earlier was just her ice clone and now she's running away. Where did that bitch go? Clyde cursed loudly. He didn't expect that his enemy would be smart enough to run away when she felt cornered. Re-D. Monsters that had even the slightest bit of intelligence left would be extremely troublesome. Clyde proceeds to rush to find Candace. It wouldn't be too difficult since there were faint ice trails she left behind as she ran. The tracks were small and only looked like scattered bits of ice. Part of the trail had melted too, but even so, Clyde was still able to track her. Candace ran toward the narrow alley that was located between the two buildings. He immediately went in there and didn't think much because he was driven by annoyance that the monster had run away and made more problems for him. It was a mistake. From above, suddenly hundreds of ice spikes fell very quickly. Shit. Clyde felt trapped. But that doesn't mean he can't escape this situation. Clyde slashed the still burning elder glass sword upwards. The slash that sent out a burst of flames expanded upwards and grabbed the dozens of ice spikes. In an instant, Clyde had managed to overcome the ice spikes trap that fell on him. After all that was done, Clyde finally caught sight of Candace the Blue Wendigo leaping over the building. So Clyde chased her with a burning rage. Pure Lightning, LV.10, is activated. ***JZZZYYYTTT. Clyde's body was surrounded by bluish-white lightning again. He no longer thought that he might be wasting his magic power now. His annoyance at the Blue Wendigo was already big enough. He shot up and climbed the building with ease. Not long after, Clyde was already on top of the building. Candace, who was about to jump over the wall, turned to him with a frightened face. Candace also said some curse words that she said in a hurry. "Come here, you bitch!" Clyde shouted. Candace directs her hand towards the pool of water which is located not far from her. From the 3 pools of water, 3 ice clones shaped like her emerged. Then Candace sent the 3 ice clones she had created toward Clyde. Clyde gritted his teeth. Then dashed with a body covered by that bluish-white lightning. Candace's 3 clones each created 2 ice daggers in their hands. Clyde realized that their speed had increased more than Candace's. He didn't know how that was possible. One ice clone attacks from the right, another from the left, while the other doesn't attack. As if waiting for the right opportunity. Even though they attack from 2 sides at the same time, Clyde's speed, who already has maxed out stats plus skill, Pure Lightning, cannot be matched by them. Clyde ducked to avoid the daggers that were aimed at his head. Then spun while slashing the elder glass sword toward the 2 ice clones simultaneously. ***croquet. ***croquet. The elder glass sword that was still burning with flames cut their neck easily. However, the 2 clones were still not destroyed. What? Clyde felt very confused. But it was only for a moment because he finally knew what was really going on. When he looked back, an ice clone that didn't join in the attack earlier was already moving away from him. Meanwhile, the two ice clones that Clyde had just beheaded regenerated and then immediately charged toward him. Clyde cursed loudly. He regretted that he had forgotten to use skill inspection on Candace. Chapter 76 Finishing Candace. Who would have thought that Candace, the blue Wendigo, could have this kind of ability? She can even control and create ice with her own will. Clyde thought that she could only speak like a normal human and deal with physical attacks like Jacob the Green Wendigo. Because of that, Clyde didn't bother using skill inspection on her. Clyde thought he can handle the healing ability if he deal enough damage to her. So it's not a big problem. Now Clyde must bear the consequences of his carelessness. The two ice clones were still attacking Clyde from two different sides. Meanwhile, another ice clone was still at a safe distance and didn't make itself within the range of Clyde's attack. Did Candace order her ice clones to do something like that? If that was true, then this looked like a high-level technique that was cast by people skilled at using their magic power. Clyde can still fight them easily. He had managed to decapitate them a few more times since earlier. The problem was that they continued to regenerate as soon as their heads were cut off. That's really annoying. After several minutes of struggling with these ice clones, Clyde finally came to a conclusion about what he had to do to be able to kill them all at once. The ice clone that was at a safe distance from him seemed to be in charge of regenerating the two ice clones that were attacking him. It looks like I have to kill them all together. Pure lightning, LV.10, is activated. Clyde immediately scattered his bluish-white lightning around. The two ice clones that were attacking him blindly were struck by the force of the lightning. But the effect caused by skill, pure lightning, was not as big as he thought. Even though the lightning struck them strongly, the two ice clones weren't instantly destroyed. Only a small part of their ice body chipped and fell onto the roof of the building. Clyde once again thought that the power of these ice clones was too great to be on this stage. The attack did not destroy the two ice clones. But at least it stuns them for a few seconds. It was a precious few seconds because it meant that their attacks stopped temporarily. *JJJZZZZTT. *. Clyde took the chance to dart past them to head for the distant ice clone. In the blink of an eye, Clyde was right in front of the ice clone. It immediately raised its ice dagger. However, the movement was not fast enough to match Clyde's current speed. *Croc. *. The flame-coated blade of the Elder Glass sword had slashed the ice clone's neck, separating its head from its body instantly. *JJZZZTTTT. *. Clyde didn't stop to watch the ice clone's head fall. Before the ice head fell to the roof of the building, Clyde had disappeared from in front of it. He returned to the two ice clones who luckily were still in the stun stage. He slashed his Elder Glass sword toward their necks. *Croc. *Croc. Their heads also immediately fell onto the roof of the building almost simultaneously with the head of the ice clone who was some distance away. After that, just as Clyde had expected, their icy bodies crumbled into tiny ice flakes. Hey! Clyde exhaled loudly. Then, with his body still covered in bluish-white lightning, Clyde dashed in the direction Candace was running. Clyde didn't want to waste any more time and let Candace run further. So he immediately ran and jumped over the building while still activating skill, pure lightning. However, he disabled skill, burning hand in hopes that he wouldn't lose too much magic power. On the other hand, Candace, who has run out of energy and magic power, can only hide in an abandoned car on the street. Her entire body trembled with fear. Candace's yellow eyes moved quickly to the window and scanned the street. She scanned the street to see if her pursuers were close. No. Candace shook her head. He's already dead. But then Candace's mind flashed back to the image of how the man had fought. He looks terrifying with that fiery sword. Candace shook her head again, trying to get the terrible thoughts out of her head. However, that thought never left her head. Instead, the form of her terror and fear appeared right before her eyes. *JJZZZZTTTT. *Prongug. Clyde falls from above in front of the car Candace is hiding in and shatters the windshield. The bluish-white lightning on his body dazzles Candace. She hadn't even had a chance to see Clyde's form before the tip of the Elder Glass sword dug into her chest. *Crot. Candace's eyes widened. The pain in her chest was felt throughout her body. The shock she felt made her freeze and couldn't do anything. But it all didn't end there. From in front of her a hand came and grabbed the collar of her brown coat and then pulled her. Clyde grabbed Candace and dropped her onto the road. Candace lay with wide yellow eyes staring up. She just lay there for a few moments. The wound on her chest had started to close. Clyde, who saw that, thought that maybe all Wendigos that have that special color have the ability to heal themselves. Clyde walked towards her and stopped beside her head. Candace's yellow eyes looked up at him from below. Those eyes conveyed a very clear fear. "Please, don't kill me," Candace said in a pleading voice. Clyde didn't answer and just raised the emerald glass sword. "Then swing it hard." Crot. Candace's head rolled away from her body and stopped not too far. Candace's eyes stared at Clyde with hatred. But once again, Clyde just ignores her because, for him, Candace is just one of the many monsters he has to kill. To the blue Wendigo killed, 1/1. The notification with pink writing on a black background appeared again, indicating Clyde's success in completing the personal request from Gremory. Clyde deactivated his skill, Pure Lightning, and let the lightning slowly disappear from his body. Phew! Only now could Clyde finally heave a sigh of relief after he had finished killing Candace. He looked around but didn't see anything or anyone around. Oh! Clyde walked over to an overhang and sat down to rest for a while. Even though he was resting, Clyde did not put the elder glass sword back into the scabbard. He stared straight ahead but his eyes seemed empty. Because actually, Clyde wasn't looking at anything up ahead. Even though his eyes were looking ahead, Clyde tried to sharpen his senses around him. Who are they? Actually, a few minutes ago, when he was chasing Candace and into the alley, Clyde had felt eyes watching him from an unseen place. Clyde tried to steal glances around when he was fighting Candace and her clone earlier. However, he couldn't see anyone. Yet he knows that someone, or something, is watching him. Even Clyde had a hunch that there was more than one side observing him. Clyde couldn't see them. But he knew they were there. Who are they? Is there another demon who wants to see me? Or another kind of celestial? Those questions filled Clyde's head. But he knew that now there was no use questioning all that. So he then stood up because he felt his time to rest was done. Well, whatever. I'll just start hunting again. Clyde goes out to hunt again. There was still a Wendigo for him to kill. And that red Wendigo would definitely give him a lot of trouble too. The blue Wendigo could even use the power of ice like a skilled mage. Clyde knew from that, the red Wendigo must also have another troublesome ability. Clyde was quite annoyed with the fact that he couldn't use the skills and stat points he had. What if he can't use it now? Then when could he use it? All of his stats and skill levels are limited to 10 only. Though he still has a lot of points. So it seems, all the points are in vain for now. Maybe later, after this apocalypse ends on day 6, these points will come in handy. Clyde continued walking through the ruined city. What Clyde felt was true. His instincts told him clearly that he was being followed. Now, even those observing and following him were not just one party, but 3 parties who have the same different goals to meet him. Nimue jumps from the top of tall buildings following Clyde after discovering his whereabouts through the beacon in the form of a necklace that Gremory gave him. He had just witnessed Clyde kill a monster that looked different than the others in this chapter. Even so, she remembered about the monster. Nimue, who had forgotten a bit about what happened in the selection stage, couldn't forget what happened in the second chapter on the 3rd day. Wendigos. A monster created from hunger. Because she managed to complete one of the 3 personal requests that Gremory gave her, Nimue is now her most loyal servant. One thing leads to another. And now Nimue has become a being with enough strength to easily pass through all of the selection stages. Nimue thought that maybe Clyde would also become a follower of Gremory like her. Because who would be stupid enough to refuse the power that Gremory offered? Gremory just told her to follow Clyde without knowing more about him. But based on what she saw, Clyde was indeed quite strong. No wonder Duchess Gremory is interested in him. Chapter 77 Lucho's appearance. Clyde continued to walk through this ruined city. Now there's only the red Wendigo that he has to kill so he can complete the personal request from Gremory. It's not like what he had expected before. He thought things were going to be even more difficult than this. Turns out he had even finished killing the green and blue Wendigo before the sun was up. But something stuck in Clyde's mind when he remembered again about how he met the 2 Wendigos earlier. It was clear that they weren't ordinary monsters. But the difference Clyde saw in them was too stark and strange. Had he ever encountered monsters with human-like consciousness like them? He didn't think so. Jacob and Candace looked like humans who suddenly turned into Wendigos against their will. It can be seen from the look on their faces that they wanted to ask for help when they knew that Clyde wanted to kill them. That is indeed strange. But there's nothing I can do, is there? Clyde kept convincing himself about the impossibility of helping humans who had already turned into that hunger monsters. So that his heart is not too heavy to accept all that he has done. After all, he had already killed 2, so he was just going to keep going until he had killed the Red Wendigo. Whatever happens next, Clyde will have no regrets. He couldn't regret it because it will only be a burden for him. R.C.O. In a world that has been ruined like this, there is no choice but to fight and kill to survive. The problem now was, the power of the Red Wendigo that he would have to kill seemed to be very troublesome. His meeting with Candace made Clyde know that the Blue Wendigo could use superpowers such as controlling ice. Then what can that Red Wendigo do? Control the fire. If blue is ice, then red is fire. That sounds reasonable. However, Clyde reminded himself to use skill, inspection before starting the fight so he would know what his enemy could do. Meanwhile, the 2 servants of Celestials were still following Clyde from behind him. They use extraordinary stealthy abilities. The ability is given directly by the Celestials they serve, so of course the effect is also powerful. They didn't think that Clyde would notice them. So, they are not worried in the slightest. Nimue, Gremory's emissary, and Lycon, Hermes' emissary, didn't even notice each other's existence because they were quite far apart. If they accidentally got a little closer, then they would eventually notice each other's existence. That man is indeed interesting. He can even tell that there are hidden pieces like Wendigo with different abilities than the others. Lycon felt excited as he watched Clyde like before. He already knew that Clyde was exceptional for some reason. Even so, seeing her do that was not within his expectations. But, how did he know about a hidden piece like that? Lycon started to wonder after thinking about it carefully. It's impossible for an ordinary human to know about the hidden piece. Unless he obtained help by forging a pact with a Celestial. So, is he already made a pact with a Celestial? That thought made Lycon feel worried as well. With this utterly useless system, Celestials could enter here more easily so they could meet him and make a very lucrative deal he couldn't refuse. With his abilities like that, it's not surprising that Clyde has become a popular figure among other Celestials. If that was true, the chances of him getting Clyde on his master's side were very slim. It's not impossible. But very small. Maybe the Celestials who met him were of demon kind. They are known for offering crazy and irresistible deals, but also at very dangerous prices. Maybe I should also see him soon, thought Lycon. He gets permission from Hermes to do what he thinks is necessary as long as he doesn't cross the line. So, Lycon will meet him and talk to him while reassuring his master. Lycon quickened his pace along the top of the building to get closer to Clyde. However, when he got close and almost jumped to meet him, someone appeared from inside a building and greeted him. A world master. Lycon cancelled his intention and frowned. The man in the white suit who had just stepped out was a world master. So they're also moving to meet him. Lycon snorted with a mocking expression at the actions of the world masters on this selection stage. Even though he was just one of Hermes' servants, Lycon was still more powerful than a world master. However, this selection stage is the world master's domain. He can't be reckless. Lycon drew closer so he could hear what the white-suited world master was going to say. Lucho smiled at Clyde with a smile he kept as friendly as possible. However, Clyde was not the least bit impressed. Clyde watched Lucho's arrival with suspicion and the hand that was already attached to the hilt of the elder glass sword, prepared to pull it out at any time. "Hi," said Lucio. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Lucho. What do you want?" Clyde got straight to the point because he didn't think there was any point in introducing himself like that. "You have already met my subordinate, Agatha," Lucho said. "Oh, so he's a world master too. How many are there?" Clyde wondered. "I'm going to say right away why I wanted to see you because I know you don't like to waste time," Lucho continued. Clyde nodded with satisfaction. Just then, suddenly, a message sounded inside his head. It was the voice of Agatha speaking hurriedly. "You can't say that you received a personal request from me. Or we'll both be in trouble." From his voice, Clyde could feel that Agatha sounded agitated and troubled. But Clyde never planned to reveal what he had received from anyone who offered him anything. It was so he could get more benefits from multiple parties at once. Of course, there was a risk when they found out that Clyde had been playing a trick on them. However, there is no good result without great risk in a world like this. I want to give you a key item to fight against something on the 5th day. But, you must sign a contract with me, Lucho said. Clyde frowned. The key item for the 5th day. It was the day the outer god appeared, just like the regressors had said. The day they never succeed then die and regress. If I can get that key item, maybe I can pass it. But, I can still beat that outer god if I get stronger, right? I feel like I can muster up enough strength to survive the 5th day, Clyde said. Upon hearing that, Lucho grinned. Yeah, I can see why you could be so confident. Based on everything you've accomplished, you must be sure you can get through this. However, what you will face on the 5th day isn't something you can handle with sheer strength. Clyde was silent for a few moments. His expressionless face made Lucho confused about what he felt. Oddly enough, Clyde didn't look as shocked as everyone he had met, and he told him about what would happen on day 5. It was as if Clyde already knew something about it. But how? No, it's not possible. Lucho believes that Clyde doesn't know anything. He just kept calm and even face so as not to show his flustered side. I just have to continue to persuade him. What's really on the 5th day? Clyde asked. Lucho smiled a serene smile. It's something out of a nightmare. All the monsters you've seen so far are nothing compared to what you'll encounter that day. But isn't there still a 6th day? Clyde asked. Yes. Lucio nodded. But you don't need to worry about day 6 just yet. Because you can't make it to day 6 if you die on day 5, right? Tell me about the monster, Clyde said. Although Clyde had heard that on the 5th day, the enemy he would face was something called an outer god, Clyde wasn't sure if it was an actual god. Lucho shook his head while letting out a chuckle. It's hard for me to describe it. The point is, you can't injure it with the weapons or skills you have. The creature came from the dark world. It doesn't have a physical body but only a collection of mystical powers that cannot be touched by all the weapons in this world. But in this apocalypse, all the world's orders regarding things that are possible and anything about magical power have changed, right? Clyde replied. Yeah, you're right. Lucho nodded. But still. That thing isn't something you can fight with whatever you currently have. I can't explain it any further because that would be against the rules. However, you can trust me about everything I say. Trust you? Seriously? Clyde scoffed inside his head. All right, I believe you. But of course, Clyde wouldn't say that out of his mouth. Lucho nodded in satisfaction. Good. Now, I will make you an offer. If you sign the contract with me, I will give you the key item to defeat the enemy on the 5th day. Clyde wanted to refuse immediately. But he felt doubtful because he didn't get any information about that outer god other than the fact that regressors always died when faced with it. So Clyde decided to wait and see before rejecting. Chapter 78 Disturbance. What is he going to do? Lycon frowned and squinted at the scene below. Is that a contract? Lycon, who was shocked, immediately widened his eyes. He couldn't let Clyde sign any contract except with his master. There's no way I'll let it be. Even though he would most likely dismantle his disguise, Lycon could not allow the World Master to give his contract to Clyde. Because with the contract he gave, whatever the contents were, then Clyde would consider it a big advantage, so the possibility for him to refuse was very small. That's what Lycon thought. Lucho stretched his hand towards Clyde. A moment later a new window appeared before Clyde's eyes. There was written a contract with only one clause that he had to sign. I, the undersigned, shall enter into a binding contract with the World Master, Lucho. Clyde frowned because of the strange-looking contract in front of him. Viewed from anywhere, it is the most suspicious and strange contract in the whole world. There were no clauses explaining what he had to do and no agreement on what exactly they should do. The box that Clyde guessed was where he should have placed his sign blinked as if waiting for it with great anticipation. What is this? Clyde asked with disapproval. This contract doesn't look right. Lucho responded by smiling first. Well, I thought you didn't like wasting time, so I cut things short. Clyde sighed. You didn't explain what I have to pay. What exactly is a binding contract? I don't know what will happen if I fail, and various other things that should be in a contract. But I can promise you a key item to fight the enemy on the 5th day, Lucho said confidently. He still thought that there was no problem with the contract he gave in front of Clyde. How do I know if you are not tricking me? Clyde asked. You don't know. But, you can trust me. After all, you can only get the power to win on the 5th day from me, Lucho said. Lucho was sure that Clyde would accept the contract. Even though he rejected him now out of disbelief, later when the 5th day came when he was on the brink of despair because he couldn't do anything to that so-called outer god, then he would beg him to give him the contract. That is not true. However, a voice suddenly came into the middle of their conversation. It was the voice of an invisible man. Clyde and Lucho both looked around to find the owner of the voice. But they couldn't find him. Lucho gritted his teeth. Who's the fucker disturbing me? Clyde, whatever that guy has to offer, I can offer something better than him, the voice said again. Clyde turned his gaze back to Lucho. He didn't say anything, but from the look in his eyes, Lucho could tell that Clyde seemed to be saying to him that he was interested in the mysterious voice's proposal. Show yourself, Clyde said. Unfortunately, I can't do that, Lycon replied to Clyde from a place he couldn't see. Then how can I trust you? You look just as suspicious as this guy, Clyde said. Lucho's face, which seemed to express confidence, now changed into something else. His jaw hardened with anger. That must be the servant of one of those damn celestials. Once again, because of this useless system, they can enter his selection stage at will. Of course, Lucho felt so mad about this. Well, all right. After a while finally, Lycon answered. Soon a faint golden light appeared not far behind Clyde. Lycon's figure appeared with a smile. Lucho frowned with eyes burning with shock and anger. It's Hermes' servant. Lucho gritted his teeth. Lucho could see from the white cloth and golden sash he was wearing that the man was a servant of Hermes, the god of speed. That bastard even dared to show himself here. For Lucho, Lycon's presence was like someone who casually entered his house. As the world master in charge of the selection stage in this world, he felt his pride being crushed by Lycon's presence. Lucho suddenly disappeared from where he stood. It then appeared right in front of Lycon. You dare show your face here? Lucho asked through gritted teeth. His eyes lit up with a greenish flame. But Lycon didn't look worried. Instead, he wore a mocking grin in Lucho's eyes. Come on, World Master. You already know that many have come here and messed up your selection stage. You even broke the rules yourself by meeting a player, Lycon said. So why are you suddenly getting angry now? Because I interfered with your scheming. Lycon asked rhetorically with a smile that was so annoying in Lucho's eyes. The flash of green fire in his eyes became even more obvious. And even though it looks relaxed, actually Lycon has also prepared his strength. On the other side from behind them, Clyde was staring with curious eyes. What exactly happening right now, and who was that man? Was that man one of the many Celestials, Agatha said? In that case, he was also interested in him to the point of showing himself here. I didn't know I was this popular, Clyde snorted with a crooked smile. For now, I'd better shut up and observe them first. Lucho and Lycon exchanged piercing looks. Neither of them yielded from expressing the desire to kill each other through their eyes. You want to fight? Now? Lycon asked. You know who's going to be at a disadvantage here, don't you? Lucho held his hand until it shook and his entire knuckle turned white. Lycon also realized that the pressure from Lucho had increased drastically. At this time Lycon thought that the fight was inevitable. He too had prepared himself. Maybe later he would have to explain at length to his master, but it wouldn't be a big deal. The problem is that Lycon isn't too sure if he can beat Lucho with ease. He was sure he could win. But at a huge cost. At this selection stage, the strength of a world master is certainly greater than that of a servant of a god. However, Lucho looked away and let out a long breath. As if he wanted to get rid of all the rage that had accumulated in his chest and was about to explode. Lucho then turned back towards Lycon and smiled. It's not wise for us to fight here. How about we all stand down now? The pressure from Lucho disappeared instantly, and Lycon also felt relief. Now, he thought that continuing this would only really lead to a fight between them. All right, replied Lycon. Lucio nodded in satisfaction. Then turned to Clyde. I'll see you later. The window containing the contract in front of Clyde suddenly disappeared. Then followed by Lucho, who also suddenly disappeared without saying a word. Clyde sighed. This is how it ended. Though I was expecting then to have a fight. Clyde wanted to see how they fought so he could get an idea of their strength. Lycon looked at Clyde from where he stood with a disappointed look. If he continued his actions, then Lucho would really come back and continue the fight. We'll meet again, Lycon said before he disappeared from Clyde's eyes. In the end, nothing happened. The two parties who met him apparently competed with each other and hated each other. But for one reason or another, they chose not to get involved in a fight. They would definitely lose a lot if they fought. Therefore they chose to leave. But that doesn't mean all of it will end now, though. That's a lot of things going on behind this apocalypse. After the two of them disappeared, Clyde continued on his way. He didn't show anything, but Clyde knew that someone was still following him. Someone smart enough not to show themselves amidst the turmoil that occurred just now. So Clyde let them in and just waited if they would approach him. Based on what happened just now, Clyde thought the remaining party would use a more subtle way to meet him so as not to cause a scene. What Clyde thought was true. Nimue, who has seen everything, decides to be more careful. She also laughed inwardly at what she just saw in front of her eyes. Luckily, the servant from Hermes appeared to prevent the World Master from forming a contract with Clyde. Thanks to him, Nimue didn't have to bother doing anything to stop him. He was also not aware of her existence. Nimue's ability to hide was so extraordinary that she could even hide from the observation of a servant of a god. He has killed 2 of the 3 Wendigos so far. Even though those Wendigos had dangerous abilities, that man could defeat them without much difficulty. Where exactly did he get such power? Nimue can't help but also wonder about Clyde's powers. Chapter 79 The Red One appears. JK. A few minutes earlier. Ha 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 ha. Agatha let out a loud laugh. Her voice echoed off the white wall. Luckily she was alone, otherwise, people who heard her laughter would think that she was crazy. Even Agatha's tears also flowed down because of her laugh. All because of what she saw on the monitor screen in front of her. On the screen was being shown a very entertaining scene. That is the scene when Lucho is humiliated by a servant of God. Agatha couldn't hold back her laughter. The satisfaction in her heart was too great, and the happiness when she finally saw Lucho's helpless form in front of a servant of God was truly priceless. Agatha actually hoped that they would fight and see what happened next. She was sure that Lucho would be beaten up by the servant of God. And that will make her even more satisfied. Unfortunately, Lucho is quite wise in making decisions. Even if he was angry, he still managed to keep himself from attacking the servant of God impulsively. Agatha's laughter finally stopped. At first, she was quite worried when she saw Lucho leave this white room. He must have finally thought that this was a good opportunity to meet Clyde. Because of that, she immediately sent a message to Clyde to keep everything a secret. Luckily, Clyde agreed to that. He wasn't too stupid and was aware of his position. Even though Clyde doesn't know anything about what's behind the apocalypse that befell his world, he knows that there are powerful beings that he can't mess with as he pleases. And then Clyde saw that 2 strong beings were almost fighting before his eyes. A world master and a servant of God who is most likely a servant of God Hermes. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Even though Agatha hadn't been a world master for a long time, she knew that no human could create such a large turmoil in the selection stage. That guy is just different, Agatha muttered while looking at Clyde, who was now walking after seeing the unusual incident before his eyes. He didn't even look surprised and just walked over casually. It was as if what he had just seen was nothing important to make him surprised. A small smile appeared on Agatha's lips. Maybe he will make another shocking change. A lot is waiting for Clyde after this selection stage. And Agatha has a hunch that he is the start of something that could break the existing order. Maybe the road to get there is still far away. Even though he was indeed strong, Clyde was still an ordinary human. He was still unable to rival gods, demons, and angels. I'll look forward to it, Clyde. Agatha thought that she would be the observing spectator and didn't want to involve too far. This will be a very interesting spectacle for her. The double doors opened. Lucho came inside with a scary face. His jaw was stiff and there was a kind of dark green flash of fire in his eyes. Agatha immediately changed her attitude to silence. The image of the torment at that time was still very clear in her mind. Now Lucho's mood is not at all good. So, there is still a possibility that he will take it out on her. Lucho threw himself on the couch, which immediately absorbed his body. Lucho exhaled loudly. Did you see what happened just now? Lucho suddenly asked. Agatha nodded with a doubtful and scared expression. It's Hermes, Lucho said. More and more impudent celestials have entered our selection stage and messed it up. It's all because of this trash system. Even though Lucho spoke without shouting, Agatha could feel the pressure in every word he said. Agatha actually felt amazed about how Lucho could still act calmly when his anger was burning inside his chest. We have to act to protect our players from outside interference, Lucho said as he stared at the screen with his green eyes still burning. Protect? You mean to keep him for ourselves and so that nobody makes a contract with him? Agatha thought while laughing disparagingly in her heart. All right, senior. What should we do? She asked. Not that I hate that idea, though. Lucho was silent and seemed to think for a few moments before finally speaking. I'll go to our headquarters to ask for a solution. You don't need to do anything for now. Agatha nodded obediently. Yes. Lucci turned back towards the screen in front of him. I won't let those Celestials get away with it again. He no longer felt hungry. That's a good thing for the current situation. But, wouldn't that make those World Masters suspect that he didn't appear to have eaten anything? So Clyde ate a chocolate bar snack until it was half gone. Then put it back into the inventory. At least he seems to have eaten something. Even if he only ate a little, those World Masters would conclude that he had run out of food and decide to save it. So there is more than one World Master. As he continued walking, Clyde started to think. So many things had happened in the past few moments that he didn't know where to start. First, he knew that there was the other World Master named Lucho. Then a new figure appeared in an unusual outfit. The man looked like he came from a fairy tale about gods and goddesses. But considering all that had happened, it was no longer something of a surprise. One thing that became the center of his mind right now was Lucho's words that said that he had the key item to defeat the outer god. If that's true, then Clyde will need it. But before that, I have to know what the contract actually contains. Lucho didn't show him anything. There was only writing that seemed to be an order saying that he had to just sign it right away. It must be because he was sure that I would accept it right away. As Clyde was walking while thinking, he felt pressure from behind him. By reflex, Clyde twisted his body while pulling out the elder glass sword. He then saw someone standing on a street lamp post. He seems to be a man judging from his body build. He was wearing a brown robe that was worn and fluttering in the wind. Unfortunately, Clyde couldn't see the man's face because it was covered by a cowl that cast a shadow on his face. Clyde could feel that the man's eyes were looking at him from under his cowl. He was definitely not an ordinary human because there was no way an ordinary human would stand on a street lamp post so easily. Who are you? Clyde asked. The man didn't answer. He was still in his original position without showing any movement. If you don't start talking, I'll attack you. Don't waste my time. Clyde gripped the handle of the elder glass sword tightly and prepared to attack. Whatever, we're going to kill each other in the end after all. Finally, the man spoke. His voice is deep and doesn't sound natural. Upon hearing his words, Clyde could not help but frown. Is he the Red Wendigo? The man spoke as if he already knew what Clyde was doing before this and what he was going to do next. Are you the Red Wendigo? Clyde asked. The man opened his cowl. A bald and dark red blood head can be seen. So it's true. Even though he knew that his target was right before his eyes, Clyde didn't attack immediately. He immediately used skill, inspection. But before Clyde could use the skill, a bolt of red lightning flashed and shot toward him. Blar. The lightning destroyed the road where Clyde had been standing. Luckily Clyde still manages to avoid that fast and powerful attack. Red lightning. I thought he would use fire. Clyde is getting another surprise now. Having previously seen the blue Wendigo give off the power of ice, it was only natural that Clyde would think that the red one would have the power of fire. However, Clyde's expectations were missed. The red Wendigo didn't even waste time talking or asking for help as the green and blue Wendigo did. He just straight up unleashed his attack on Clyde. Alright. Clyde dashed to approach the red Wendigo. The red Wendigo shot his red lightning in succession toward Clyde. Blar. 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 Clyde could bend his body to avoid the red lightning shots. The asphalt on the road that was struck by it shattered and flew up, creating a mist of ruins that lasted a few moments. Clyde shot out from behind the white mist. His eyes stared straight at his target, who was still standing on the street light pole. Pure lightning, LV.10, is activated. JZZZYYTTT. Brilliant bluish-white lightning enveloped Clyde's body and elder glass sword, making his already incredible speed even faster. Clyde kicked the ground and shot at the red Wendigo. In the blink of an eye, Clyde was right in front of him and immediately swung the lightning-shrouded elder glass sword. Clang! The red Wendigo also took out his sword, which was red in color and seemed to be made of red lightning that hardened into a blade. When the elder glass sword's blade collided with it, a shockwave accompanied by bluish-white and red lightning spread out in all directions. Clyde then kicked the red Wendigo in the stomach and knocked him off the street lamp post. Meanwhile, Clyde also fell back on the road. As expected, this will be a troublesome battle too. Chapter 80 Quite tough. Clyde and the red Wendigo face each other. Their bodies emitted lightning of a contrasting color. Clyde was quite surprised to see what power this red Wendigo had. He also approached him, unlike the green and blue Wendigo who waited for him to come for them. The red Wendigo looks different. He was more like a hideous monster and came from a place full of blood and war. He looks ready to fight him. Besides that, the red Wendigo also had a strange sword. The sword was not shaped like a normal sword. The blade is jagged on both sides. The blade looked made of condensed lightning. That sword is definitely not an ordinary weapon. Where did he get it? Besides, how did he know I was here? So many questions in Clyde's head at this time. But he knew that he couldn't ask the red Wendigo because the monster seemed to have only one wish at the moment. To kill him. The red Wendigo suddenly dashed towards him. He left a trail of red lightning the moment his foot hit the ground. In the blink of an eye, the red Wendigo was front of Clyde's eyes. He let out a flash of red lightning that blinded Clyde's eyes for a moment. Clyde, who felt that he was in a dire situation, cursed in his heart. Then he also shot his white bluish lightning forward, hoping it would strike the red Wendigo that blinded him. Unfortunately, his lightning only struck empty air. The red Wendigo had already jumped up and was ready